Hey, it's me, Rasan. I don't know, man. Huge hole in my,
Yeah.
understanding. My fellow Americans.
Papa Bear here.
As long as whatever you're doing doesn't hurt anyone else, I don't care.
Different perspective of what an interesting topic is than I would assume.
This is Balanced Exchange. Cronus is here, and we're back with Balanced Exchange, and I'm here with
Papa Bear. And today we'll be talking a little bit about the difference between just wars and unjust wars. And we'll be basing that in a lot of external reference. So this is, what's kind of funny is this book was something that after, I think probably about 12 years in the Marine Corps, right, was introduced to me as a part of one of my early political science classes. And I actually fell in love with the book I'm going to use as our primary reference. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But it's amazing to think that not only as a citizen and like as a member of any nation in the world, but then also like as a member of the military and having been in as long as I was for like 12 years, I still had never heard of this concept of the difference between like a war that is justified and a war that is not, right? And so how you make those determinations and if that's even a real thing, right? Like, is there any reason that something could be justified? So it's an interesting topic to talk about, and I'm kind of excited for us to go over this today.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting for me, especially because, I've been separated from the Marine Corps for a long period of time. And so my concepts of war and justifications for war are probably not what people would normally think that a Marine would ever have. So my value of life has definitely risen post Marine Corps. And this is going to be hopefully a really good conversation to have, because especially right now, because the whole concept of war is like really, it's in America, especially, it's a very strange concept because there's been no war since the Civil War that have been fought on American soil. Really. I mean, we had, attacks on America, but not actually a war. And so anytime we have a war, where America is involved, it's on foreign soil. So we don't see like all the horrific sides of war. And so I think that definitely kind of guides Americans as like a populace on what wars are just or not just, because they don't see the actual cost of war.
Yeah. And I think so, like, because they're words, right? And one of the things, and I haven't really said this yet, actually, now that I think back through the episodes we've covered so far, is one of my like favorite phrases, right, is that words mean things, right? If you use a word and you use it because you think it will like generate this interest in what it is you're talking about, there's a reason that word is used, and that word has a purpose and it means something. Just to use it to try to generate a response like drives me insane. So I think maybe like mid this topic, one of the things we'll talk about is like a war on terrorism and like a war on drugs and like a war on crime or violence. Like, how do you create a war or like justify this war in the concepts we're talking about, and using that word without it really meaning what it is you mean on it. So it's tough, right? And so as soon as you start using that word, it shouldn't be used in a lot of those contexts, and there's a different thing that you mean. But because we do, like, we had a little bit of a sidebar topic before we got started, like, because we often have to kind of talk about topics to the lowest denominator, right? We have to teach to the lowest denominator in the Marine Corps, and like in most of our education systems, we'll use a word like war to explain conflict, like, or to say, a pursuit of eliminating something. Like, those are two very, very different things.
Yeah, and that's something that, anytime I hear about, like when we talk, especially like recently when we're talking about like the war on COVID, we have to beat the invisible enemy. I'm just like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like, you can't, what you're saying, you don't know what you're talking about when you talk about like a war on a thing that you literally, you're not going to war with it. Like, no. It doesn't, there's no war front against a virus. Like, there just isn't. And I don't like that Americans as a whole have been so desensitized to the actual word of war and not really understanding like what all goes with that. Because to me, war means fucking extreme violence.
Yeah.
And
for a purpose, usually.
Yeah. It's usually for like resources or political. There's a couple other meanings too that I'm sure you're going to get into in this podcast. But it's just like people don't really understand what the word war means because it's been so desensitized through various means, through our leadership in America. And to me, it's very strange and it's sad. It's really sad.
So the primary reference I use, and it was funny because when we started talking, deciding we were going to talk about this topic, I like ran over to my bookshelf to grab my copy of the book I'm going to use as a primary reference, and realized I have it in my office next to a bunch of other books on similar topics because in my position now, like I frequently have conversations like this with either junior officers or some senior like enlisted folks to try to help them understand more about what our organization's purpose is, how we're supposed to do things in order to make sure that you can walk away from this career and what it is that we do in the Marine Corps, knowing that you've done the right thing, right? And so I went to go grab that book because I love it. My copy of it too, which is so the current version and the one we're going to talk about today is the 5th edition, and I have a copy of the 4th edition because 5th edition came out in 2015, and I was doing classes in 2012, I think. So that version wasn't even out yet. But the original book was written in 1977. So I mean, it's an old book on concepts, right? And what we're going to be talking about is really like philosophy and like things about about how like, I mean, we're talking concepts to the point where the Stanford study I'm going to reference is under a category that they call Plato, which is like literally like really, really old school style. Let's break this down in a very fundamental philosophical way and like think about like almost the meta concept of think about how we're thinking. Yeah. Like why are you thinking a certain way? Why are you thinking about acting a certain way? And you have to think about your thinking and think about your acting. It's super meta. It's like these deep philosophical things. But I love my copy because like I'd gone through and I highlighted like certain paragraphs that I love like as a very key reference. So I'm gonna have to go without those specific kind of like quick flips. Let me flip through. Oh, there's that page that I really like to read from. So I'm trying to do my best. So give me a little bit of room if I kind of stumble for a second to try to find what it is I wanted to say.
No, it's all good. Real quick though, there's usually two things that we do in the beginning of all these podcasts, at least so far. First of all, it's what we're drinking.
Yeah.
So you had a story about what you're drinking? I wanted to...
I do. So, okay, two parts of this. One, this is in like a blown sea glass cup from Okinawa. So like this is Okinawan glass and it's varying in colors. You have like little imperfections in the bubbles in it. I freaking love this glass. But I'm trying really hard to drop a few pounds. So I'm hitting the keto like super, super heavy, like trying to nothing and like work hard. And like every exercise I do is not about pace or speed or distance or anything. It's time and heart rate to make sure I'm in fat burn and like really, really driving the keto forward. Right. So, So I'm like, I want to go grab a beer right now. And that is not okay.
No. Yeah, that'll definitely knock you out of keto, out of ketosis.
So, yeah. So right now in this is just ice and then Tito's vodka, which 0 carbs, 0 calories. And then I added basically a Perrier, also nothing, carbonated water.
This is what I do.
And then like a little bit of lemon juice because lemon juice also 0 carbs. But like when you drink those fake flavored water things, like they're flavored a little bit. There's really not much there. So the little bit of lemon juice like actually adds some citrus and some real flavor to it. So that's not what I'm normally drinking, but it's what I need right now.
No, I mean like when I go like full keto, like I drop pretty much all alcohol except for like maybe whiskey, but no, actually I usually drop all alcohol. I try. Right. So the thing is when you're doing ketosis is that I was keto for a long time. That's how I dropped a lot of weight. And if you're drinking, technically it's not going to kick you out of ketosis, but you're not going to produce ketones while you're drinking.
Stop.
Yeah,
for
so
the next whatever 10 hours I'm going to do. So.
Yeah, because your body's like, I need to process this poison basically out of your system first before I can start making ketones. It comes from your liver, so your liver produces ketones. And if you're drinking alcohol, if you're not drinking beer or things with carbs, then that's what happens. But if you're doing keto,
enough, so I found a study talking about drinking. I was trying to pick. I'm like, what can I drink? Because we do usually have a drink while we're talking. And it's talking about like you also, if you are in ketosis and like have been for more than just a couple of days, like you're not going to need to drink as much. Be careful because your liver is like mostly ready to process ketones. It's going to be like, what the heck? And it's going to have to do this big transition and you will get a little more messed up. So you don't need as many to be sitting happy and sitting comfortable and enjoying yourself. So
yeah.
So it's like, be careful.
See, unfortunately, because you're active Marine, you don't have the option of using cannabis because that's the other way around of like, I need to relax. And there's no carbs in cannabis. Yeah. I mean, unless you're taking like an edible, like with sugar.
Brownie.
Yeah. Then you got carbs. But if you're going to smoke it, then there's no carbs in smoke. So that's another way around it. But yeah, I'm glad that you're doing the keto thing. You did your research. You're a guy that seems like you do your research. So yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So like, and I've done. So I'm also intermittent fasting, and I say intermittent, but like right now it's like it's hardcore intermittent fasting. So every single day this week, and my plan is until I make the weight that I really want to hit for my target and the strength I want to get to, is I will not fast. That's a really bad way to say it, but I'm going to fast every weekday and then not fast on the weekends, but I'll still be focused on keto. So like my fasting is 20 hours basically. So I only eat from 1600 to 1800.
Nice.
Yeah. So 20-hour fast each day. So that's every day, Monday through Friday. So
I fast as well. Well, I fast every day. So yeah, like I think my minimum window is like I start eating at 2.
yeah,
But usually it's
16.
like usually it's like four or five.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, it's like especially when you're working out, it's hard. People ask me about this can become like a dietitian thing, but people ask me about like, oh, what about keto? I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can do. I did keto. I had like a lot of results, but if you have any like the inkling of like undisciplined in your body, it's not going to work for you. So just like I'll talk about it with some people, with other people, where I'm like, you're probably not going to make it. Like I'm just like, no, just go do something else because it's fucking hard. Like,
Well,
it's
especially
hard.
and like you started to mention too, like if you're working out at the same time, so like fasting plus keto plus like working out hard. Like today
Yeah.
it was a long, hard workout, and I told you when we started, I was like, I am freaking exhausted today. Like
Yeah.
I can just feel it. Like I didn't sleep well, woke up early to do some stuff, and then normal work day plus keto plus fasting plus like I pushed pretty hard, but by like so I went distance and time, but specifically staying heart rate too. So like it was like no less than 30 minutes, and I had to go at least 3 miles, but then also can't go over 175 for a heart rate. Like I have to stay between like 150 and
Oh, it's
175.
hard.
And
Yeah.
so you start trotting slow to slow the heart rate down and then speed back up, and
Yeah.
it was exhausting. It was hot in 29 pounds, middle of the day.
Yeah. It's. I just remember like when I first started doing keto because there's hacks to it. Have you used beta
Yeah.
hydroxybutyrate yet?
And I have a container,
Yeah,
but I haven't started.
that's a good way to get around all this nonsense of feeling bad. So it definitely helps.
Yeah, so I did two things. So one of the big ones, I'm trying to stay as natural as possible and not bring too many like artificial like needing to like have a powder to do it. So one of the big things that can make that work on its own too is the so every bit of water I drink every day has lemon juice and salt in it, and that helps you like generate some of those on your own, so you don't get the fatigue and some of the other things that you get normally. That I think the BHAs are also kind of trying to fix the same problem. So
Yeah.
I think I'm going to need to in 2 weeks and like start kicking that in to bring it on too, because I'm going to keep stepping it up until it all is done.
Yeah, I mean, like when I first went keto, because I knew about this problem, like the keto flu thing, and so for me, I'm just like, well, I consider myself a badass. So I was like, you know what? I heard the first 3 days are the worst, so I'm just gonna get up as early as possible as soon as the gym opens. Like when I was still going to like a normal gym.
When
Yeah, and I'll get up at like I think like 4:30 in the morning, and then I'll go to the gym, and I would just do like 30 minutes of hard cardio just to empty the tank out, just to get all the glucose out of my system. But you feel like the whole time I'm like doing this car. It's only for like 3 days, but I'm feeling like actually it was a week. I felt like garbage the whole time. Like I was literally on the verge of throwing up the whole time.
Well, and like one of the things too, and we probably do need to move on, but the like one of the key things to understand about it too, and I work and you work in primarily an intellectual profession. Like I use my brain for 90% of my work, and like your brain only runs on glycogen. It needs sugars, right? And so if you don't eat carbs or sugars, if you go the whole day, like your body has to develop this long energy consuming process to generate glycogen so that your brain can function. So you feel foggy. You're like every once in a while, like, but the fasting does help because it sharpens your brain too, because you kind of get into the hunter mindset where you're like, I need food. So it's a weird balancing act. Every once in a while, like I've noticed, I'm like, I feel really lethargic right now, but then an hour later, I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah,
It's just really weird.
Yeah, once you get into like real like deep ketosis for a while, are you using like a blood sample to like see if you're in ketosis?
I'm not testing anything. I'm just reading really strict on what I eat. So
yeah, I would recommend using a blood mirror.
I haven't gone so far as to order one. I know I need to, and this is going to sound stupid and maybe weird to those who don't have any idea what we're talking about. But like, I'm honestly basically basing my ketosis on like what my sweat smells like.
Oh yeah, no, like definitely get the meter, man. Like
Yeah, it works though. Like I honestly, after 3 days working towards it, like I could clearly tell like that is a totally different smell to my sweat.
well,
Totally different. So as long as it still smells like that, I'm good.
all right, all right. Well, I mean, if you can get the blood meter, do
Yeah,
it.
I plan to
Yeah.
because I'm gonna take this very seriously. But it's like I'm in the. This is literally the second week starting keto,
Okay.
first week with fasting. So I've done it before, but like this time, like post holiday, that's the day I'm starting. This is second week. So
Cool, cool. All right. Anyway, back to what we're drinking. I'm not drinking anything. I'm not keto right now. Because I'm where I want to be for a
nice.
while.
Yeah, holidays.
I'm drinking. What is this called? It's a single cut Beersmiths is the name of the brewery,
Hmm.
and the name of the beer is Malef. Jesus Christ, I can't even read this. Mellifluous Life
Hmm.
IPA, and it's actually a lower alcohol content. Usually, I drink
Okay,
beers over eight
I have
percent.
to. I'm opening a new tab. All right, hold on. What the hell does that word mean?
You looking at
I know it. I know. I feel like I understand.
Mellifluous? I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right.
Sweet or musical, pleasant to hear.
Not Maleficent.
No,
Mellifluous.
yeah, mellifluous
Yeah.
is it's for a voice or for words. It's sweet or musical and pleasant to hear. The voice was mellifluous and smooth, according to dictionary.com.
All right. Is that what my voice sounds like right now? Can I do some
Yeah,
ASMR for all you motherfuckers?
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
your beer and your voice are mellifluous.
Even though the beer's almost done. But yeah. Anyway, and we do a disclaimer, but I think we're just gonna cut it in because we already did one. We're just gonna keep using it.
So at this point in watching our videos, you may or may not know that I am an active duty United States Marine. And I've been doing this for 20 plus years, so I know that it's really important for me to make sure to get this out there. If it's your first time watching this, please stick around and make sure you understand the disclaimer. If you've watched a whole lot of our episodes so far, feel free to go ahead and jump ahead to the new content. So what I need to talk about today is that I am not authorized and have no way of being approved to speak on behalf of the Marine Corps. So any opinion that I give or any concept that I discuss today is the position and the opinion of just me, myself, just a man who has a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in leadership and organizational management and has spent my whole life looking at government structures and social contracts and how these things are supposed to work, what the philosophies and things behind them are, and read a lot of books on that kind of stuff. And it's definitely one of my personal and key passions. And so when you hear me maybe give a position or a concept on something, that is only my own position. I am not a public affairs officer for the Marine Corps. I am in no way giving what the Marine Corps' official position on anything would be. And honestly, a lot of the topics we're going to cover here, I'm pretty sure the Marine Corps doesn't have a particular position on. So if you do have any questions about what the Marine Corps' policy on certain things could be, you can definitely research that and find those out, or leave a comment or send us a message if you can get a hold of us somehow. We can maybe be able to answer those questions for you. So with that said, let's get you back to this week's content.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first reference, and I kind of alluded to it, and I haven't given you the title yet. So it's a book by a guy named Michael Walzer. So there has been, because it was such a cornerstone in this concept, there have been since 1977 when he wrote the first one, like lots and lots of other philosophers who have written like counterpoints and rebuttals, and like there are basically more books either contradicting or supporting his points than there are on many other subjects, specifically just talking about his points, like not even saying in this general topic I also want to talk about something, and oh, by the way, his points, like literally just being like, Michael Walzer's book, this is what's wrong with it, I'm going to write about it. And you're like, so if it's that like that controversial, there's something real in there that's like kind of really trying to generate this dialogue like we're trying to have. So it's Michael Walzer, and the book is called Just and Unjust Wars, right? It was written in 1977, and I think the title includes like a little subtitle thing too. So where it says like it's a moral argument with historical illustrations, which is one of my favorite parts of it, because basically he says this is the concept, this is where philosophy says it should go, and here are historical examples of wars that show that is the way things should be done or are being done. Some examples, because I wanted to really hit on, like, if you like history, and I know both of us do, and you like especially like military history, these are the conflicts specifically that he uses as examples. So he talks about the Battle of Agincourt. He basically bases a whole section off of a bunch of arguments that were written by Karl von Clausewitz, if you know who Clausewitz is.
I do not.
So he talks about General Sherman and his burning of Atlanta, basically, and like how that falls into certain categories when things do or don't meet just war requirements. Because there's two real general topics to this, and I'll cover those in a second, though. He talks about Hitler's generals specifically, the generals, not Hitler, but his generals and how they prosecuted their war. What else is in here? There's so many. Specifically, the Battle of Alsace-Lorraine during World War II. Talks about Marx and his Franco-Prussian War. Czechoslovakia, Munich Principle. War of Spanish Secession, Six-Day War. Arguments from John Stuart Mill, the Hungarian Revolution, American War in Vietnam, which is a really big, like, really key example in these stories. Talks about Cuba in 1898 and Bangladesh in 1971. I'm telling you, these are just like, I'm just trying to read down his, like, the examples. So the Allied policy, so not the Axis, but Allied policies for prosecuting the war during World War II. The Korean War. Talks about arguments from Henry Sedgwick. I would have been able to tell you a while ago exactly what the relevance there was. I cannot remember who that individual is. Talks about submarine warfare, specifically Laconia Affair, bombardments in Korea, which was a pretty big deal because a lot of times that goes into just in bellum, which we'll cover, but it's how you do it, right? That's a big important part. And then bombing of occupied France and Wehrmacht raid. Siege of Jerusalem in 72 AD. Siege of Leningrad, British blockade of Germany. American rules of engagement in Vietnam. We already talked about Vietnam a little bit. I know I'm reading down a list. This is a long list, but I'm almost done. Russian populists, the IRA, and the Stern Gang, and how those things relate to each other too, and relate to specifically having a political code applied to conflicts within, like, the terrorism spectrum.
Yeah.
Viet Cong and their, like, assassination campaign that they kind of went on. Battle of Algiers. I'm trying to hit just battles, but there's a couple things I really want to talk about. So, Chairman Mao and the Battle of, like, River Hung. So this is post World War II, and then Mao and him still running stuff, and then some of his internal battles, like, to keep things together. And then, because then you really have to talk about, it's a conflict internal, like civil wars, how the justification there goes too. So there's a big thing talking about neutrality too, because that's a big part of this too. If you think one way or the other for justification, or there is no justification for it, but then being neutral kind of falls into those categories in a discussion too. So there's this really interesting dialogue from Churchill during World War II, specifically talking about Norwegian neutrality in World War II, and it feeds pretty well into that conversation. It's kind of interesting. Plus, I mean, he's a very interesting character. I won't say, like, great, but, like, his ability to speak and, like, the way he talked about things was really interesting. It's definitely something that, like, captivates you. You know, you'd, like, want to keep listening.
Yeah.
Hiroshima.
Yeah.
You know, like that, and it's weird because it's listed specifically just Hiroshima, but, like, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, like, dropping nuclear weapons, like, making that decision and its justification within warfare. Almost done.
Well, okay, go ahead, and then we'll talk about it.
Nuremberg and My Lai. I bet you read about My Lai or talked about My Lai before.
Well, it's been, Jesus Christ, a long time ago. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty much it. Okay. As far as actual specific conflicts that he uses as examples, and that's, for me, what was, like, super captivating about reading this was not just, like, here's the philosophies and here's the rules and highlight the things and pass the test, right? Is that, like, his book told you what it is you're supposed to learn from these concepts, or, like, how it is that we're supposed to apply them, but then gave you, like, real examples that were like, I know that battle. I would love to hear more about it. And you kind of, like, read his interpretation of it when specifically talking about a specific portion of it. So it is absolutely not my intent to try to cover this whole entire goddamn book. It's long. It's a big book. It's a textbook, right? So I mean, this is a book you use to teach this kind of concept in a college course. So I'm not going to cover all of it, but I do want to hit on some key points. But I felt like a summary of just look at all these examples of like the really, really great usage of conflicts in history to show how each of these concepts can really be applied in the real world that you could look back into. So I felt like that was worth spending a few minutes to kind of cover. I apologize for it taking so long.
No. I mean, it really is. I mean, there's obviously battles there where it's like immediately where it comes up to where there are responses that happen. I mean, especially if you look at like the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, it's like the response that America had to bombing the cities were, to me, like now that I'm well removed from like being active Marine, it seems like rather extreme. You know, when Japan, you know, when they attacked Pearl Harbor, it was a military installation. You know, and so they were attacking military assets. There was, as far as like civilians go, the count of civilian deaths were relatively low. Even though obviously they caught us, you know, not with our pants down, but they didn't declare open war with us, which up until that point was like something you would normally do. You know, there was usually like, you wouldn't just attack somebody, you know, like that, like out of the blue, especially when we're not involved in the conflict at all. You know,
you would think so.
Well,
right?
I mean,
so like we expect that kind of as civilized societies, but there's a big part of just ad bellum as one of the justifications for war is being attacked unprovoked by someone else, right? So pretty much any of us today would say, like, maybe like the stigma around stand your ground right now makes it seem like it's a little excessive. It goes a little crazy sometimes, but like no one would argue that if someone came in to your property or into your territory, into your society, the people that you have agreed to be a group together and actually started like attacking people, that it's okay to defend yourself against them.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it's also, it's like, what is the extent of your defense? It's like, is your defense, is the extent of your defense killing the person that, you know, encroached upon your property and endanger your life? Yeah, I mean, that's justified, right? Like, if you think your life is in danger and the person that's perpetrating the danger, I think you're justified. But if you then kill the person that, you know, that you thought you were in danger from and then kill his whole family, it's like, oh, well, you know, like, that gets a little fucking, not even gray area to me. It's like, that's kind of fucked up.
And like, a caveat on even the first part of that. So like, you mentioned in danger, but like, so recently, and this is maybe a shock to people who like, this is a United States Marine Chief Warrant Officer who's been doing this thing for 20 years. I literally, here in California, of all places, have finally owned and licensed my first firearm of my own.
Nice.
Right? Every other time, I've always just used other people's guns. There's people I hang out with, there's more than enough guns around. So I was able to just go shoot or go hunting with someone else's rifles. I've never had a need to. Plus, like, I move every 3 years, and dealing with like transporting weapons is always an issue. But I felt like it was worth it in this location to have a home defense weapon. So got a shotgun and have like, you know, a nice, cool, actually, I don't know if I sent you the video, I'll send it to you later, or we can clip it in right here or whatever, but got one of those really nice, super high speed, like quick access types of safe storage for it.
Nice.
I told Enrique, a friend of ours, like that.
His birthday was yesterday, wasn't it? Turned 43?
Maybe 2 days ago now?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Told him kind of late today, happy birthday. We went PT, we ran at lunch, but so I told him, like, I tested it out, and like right now, from bed to weapon out, on off safe, at hallway door, ready to defend the house, 8 seconds.
It's not bad.
It's pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's okay. So his concern was there's like a kind of a safety mechanism to it. He's like, how do you know how to do that in the dark? Because it is kind of complicated. I was like, oh, no. I prepped that before going to bed so that there's like one thing to push and I'm ready. And then I just put it back in the morning if I'm done. So
nice.
But my point on that was, if the person coming in has a baseball bat, am I really justified to shoot him in the face with a shotgun? That's kind of where we have to go with this conversation, because it's proportionality of the conflict, right? It's a really small scale version of the same thing we're going to kind of cover when we talk about conflicts between nations and things like that.
that's a
Or
can of worms that actually America deals with to this day when it comes to use actually well mainly I'm just gonna say America because this is where I fucking live.
mm,
Where it's like use of force.
yeah,
If you think your life is actually in danger, but this is the problem
yes,
though, is that if somebody with a baseball bat or or just somebody that thinks if you think they're gonna kick your ass, that's not even armed at all. In certain parts of America, like if you're getting beat up, you're justified in killing the person. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like to me, it's just like, listen, I know how to defend myself. So it's just like if somebody's gonna kick my ass, like, I mean, first of all, good luck. Second of all, like, I don't, especially if you start something, which is, I mean, we can get into the whole, I forget the guy's fucking name, but it's the guy that killed Trayvon Martin. I don't even want to say his name, but it's like if you follow somebody and confront them, and you get your ass kicked by confronting them, are you justified in killing them?
Nope.
Yeah, in my mind, and most rational people's mind, is no, because you should not be confronting somebody and then things get out of hand and then you decide to end it with a firearm. That
yeah.
should never be. Vigilantism should not be promoted in America. I don't understand why people, like a lot of people in America, thought that the guy was justified in killing that kid. But it's just like you can't stalk somebody and confront them, or you shouldn't be able to stalk because obviously you got away with it. To stalk them and confront them and then kill them. It's like, yeah, you got your
Right.
ass kicked, but I mean, an ass kicking is just the kid probably wasn't going to kill you.
So hindsight being 2020, right? Like we know he had no firearm. So assume both people in that situation, neither one of them had a firearm.
Yeah,
Either one of them with just their fists. After like me looking at the characters involved in this situation, neither one of them are gonna be kill each other
yeah,
with just like punches. Like you're not. So the situation becomes different if it's like someone who is 6'8" and 350 pounds and all muscle and like a little like okay, you might break this person's face with just punching them. So then you can feel justified. Like I need something to bring these things back to balance where the conflict between us needs to be squared. So like I need some other kind of weapon or something else to defend myself to make this even a fair fight.
but you also wouldn't
Um,
start the fight. You know what I mean? In a situation.
I noticed I did not even talk about that part because
Yeah,
if you start the conflict, it is in that other person's 100% in their rights to absolutely defend themselves with proportionality.
yeah,
And so that's where it starts to be weird because like if you just start a fight with someone, they have every right to fight with you. Neither of you have a right to shoot each other until someone else brings out the gun, and then the other person can defend themselves with a gun too. So as soon as you escalate, things should and are justified to be continue to be escalated. Like, and that's why all of this stuff gets to be a really weird thing. Is you mentioned it when we first started? Is like you talk about resources or like the political reasons for that first strike piece, where you're
yeah.
like, where does that first attack happen? That then generates all of the follow-on justifications and potential escalations. And most of the time, and in almost every historical example, which is a big part of why like some of the other studies have like poked holes in his theories, is that you get like ad hoc and post. I'm trying to think of the right legal term, but it's where like you get post justification of why it was that you even made that first initial attack. It starts to sound justified, and in
Yeah,
almost every case, it's there, right? But you're like, but no one knew that, and you didn't say that, and it wasn't violence. It was like protecting your people. It's always down to like this very gray area stuff when you look at that initial strike that maybe started a conflict. I mean, Franz Ferdinand is like one of the key examples, like World War One. You're like, why did that assassination happen? There's not a good answer for it.
well,
But
that's
then
good.
also every trickle down effect, like also there's not a really good answer for, but it was like powder keg just ready to go. And that was just the thing that kind of lit it off. But so much of it is you're like, you look at the real examples and like you can find quotes from people and it's like, none of that is like really, really 100%. Like you could look at it and go, yeah, without a doubt, absolutely justified. Continue going. But
Yeah.
it's kind of creepy.
I mean, even the Franz Ferdinand thing, right? It was a failed assassination attempt, and then one of the guys got away. If I remember this correctly, it's been a while since I read up on this. But like one of the people that was supposed to originally assassinate him saw him later on in the day and then killed him, right?
Oh, geez, I don't even know that level of detail. I only focused on the like. I never saw that story. So it
Yeah,
was mostly about the actual assassination, and then all the after effects, and then stories as to why that person was supposed to do that. In any of those cases, it's like I never heard about it being a two attempt success.
I'm
Basically.
pretty sure that was it. I'll have to like look it up right now, but I'm pretty sure the original attempt was not. Um, it was failed because it was supposed to be like a group of people, and then it was a
Hmm.
failed attempt because they took like a wrong street or some shit like that. And then later on, like the guy was sitting at a cafe, and then he saw Franz Ferdinand. He was like, "Well, he's right fucking there." So then he shot him. So yeah,
It's like we're supposed to meet. We're supposed to meet Julius Caesar on the steps of the Senate. Like, oh
yeah,
shoot, I was at the voting booths. I was in the wrong spot.
yeah. I'm looking it up, but I'm pretty sure what I said is correct. But that's what I remember. Like his assassination, it was two times, and the first time it was just like they totally missed the guy, and then like
Just
the guy was sitting in the cafe. Yeah.
not like tried and missed, but just went to the wrong spot.
Well, I think he took the route that he was taking to go somewhere. It wasn't on the route of like the assassination attempt, and so it was
Mhm.
like, oh, I guess fuck it. And then some of the people that were in the assassination plot were at a cafe, and then he passed by, but I have to look it up. I'm gonna look it up right now as I'm speaking.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So I do have. Let's see here. Sorry, my notes slipped out of the way there. So I do have a copy of it up here. So while we discuss a little, I'm gonna go ahead and share this actually, just so we can.
Sure.
Actually, let me pull up what I want to talk about first. So there are two basic like phrases you use in talking about just and unjust warfare. They're Latin phrases. So you say jus ad bellum. So it's JUSAD bellum, and so the bellum is basically war. So you're talking about BELLUM, right? So there's just ad bellum, and then there's just in bellum. So just ad bellum is basically talking about justification to start a war, right? So like, is the war itself and its conflict and the whole reason for you in doing it justified? So is this a conflict that has a purpose that we could all say that makes sense? And usually it's the most obvious one is the one we talked about earlier, where it's always justified, which is when you're like defending your people, right? So we start the war because someone else attacked us, and we are defending ourselves to make sure that we protect our people. So then, just in bellum is justified actions within the conflict. So there's kind of two levels to talking about justification within war, not just is the war itself and having a conflict even justified, but like, is your behavior in the war also a moral and upright and justified behavior? And that's where things really start getting conflicted. Most people can kind of put a couple categories together and say this is justified to start a war and this is not justified to start a war. But then what's proper behavior, Geneva Conventions versus this versus that? Do people follow them? Is there any way to really say that anything is okay or not okay when you're in a fight for your life, right? It starts getting weird. So there's kind of like two groups on that piece of it, and I feel like that's the cooler topic to talk about. So we'll hit the first one because it's a little easier. So justification for a war. I want to find that. Go to just ad bellum real quick. Move my notes. Did you find what you're looking for?
yeah, I was actually reading it. I was trying to listen to you and read it at the same time. But yeah, it definitely was Bosch at the very beginning, and so I was trying to go down like the rest. But yeah, it was supposed to be like it's supposed to be a bomb that was supposed to kill him in like his car or some shit like that. And then that didn't happen. It was some kid that was like 17 years old, that was armed with a pistol and a bomb, and he witnessed a failure. And then yeah, it was. I'm trying to read through the whole thing right now, but it's like it was definitely a Bosch attempt the first time, and they got lucky on the second time.
So like, yeah, because it was so in a bomb too, right? So talking about that, like, is a little easier to be ambiguous as to.
Hold on, I can read part of it right now.
Yeah.
About the Bosch attempt. So they were in a car, so they're at the right location, and then somebody hurled a grenade directly towards the Archduke's car, but the driver saw it and then accelerated away, and the bomb bounced and then folded back of the convertible cover and rolled into the seat. and there's a 10-second delay and it exploded, but it didn't kill Archduke Ferdinand.
Wow.
So
Survived a grenade going off inside the car.
yeah, so it was like a crazy thing that happened. They saw him like later on the same day. People that are part of the same conspiracy to kill him, and then they killed him. So it's just like it was crazy, like a series of events that happened.
Yeah, they were very serious about being able to do that.
Yeah.
Wanted to make sure it happened. So I'm trying to find, because again, I normally have this stuff highlighted. I think it's here. You have reached the page that's unavailable. Darn it! So I am looking at like what I thought was a free copy of pretty much the whole book, everything I've looked at.
It was not free.
Google Books. I was about to just buy it on Amazon, like a digital version, so we could talk about it. But then I was like, oh, here's a totally free version. I was like, maybe it's just old enough of a book, but darn it. I can't see that page. Yeah, because I wanted to talk a little more in detail and kind of show you specifically like paragraphs in it, talking about just ad bellum. Because what I want to hit for sure is like a couple of the key concepts. So as I already said, like the most obvious one where you can say, yes, I agree that it's a justified war, right, is one where you're attacked and you then say, okay, we're at war now because you attacked us, and initiate conflict with them because you are defending yourself and responding to external attack on yourself, right? So those are the ones, if you look through history, and there are historical examples in his book that talk specifically about it, pretty much everybody agrees like that's fully justified. I totally understand why those two countries went to war, because those people attacked them. So then it's a two-part thing, right? Because the country being attacked is justified for continuing the conflict, where the first country who attacked for reasons maybe unknown is not justified. They should not have done that, right?
Yeah, well, it depends. Yes, but it depends on what they're attacking them for.
How? What do you feel like? Like
Well,
why
I mean,
would that be?
there would be certain things that were like if another country didn't necessarily declare war on somebody, but they were doing things to a country that were like, we'll take the example of like raiding the country, or stealing resources, or putting their population into slavery, shit like that. Those would be justifications of war, even though the original country that were perpetrating the actual atrocities didn't actually declare war, but they were doing things that I would consider justifiable to do war against them. Yeah, to retaliate.
So
Yeah.
in the defense argument, all of those count, right? They are attacks from another group against your group, whether you call it like a country, a nation, a state, or whatever. Because throughout history, we've called them different things. Sorry, there was a noise.
It's all good.
Yeah. So in any of those cases, and I guess, so to clarify something else, so like you keep mentioning like that a country declares war before they make an attack.
Yeah, it's rarely the case though. Yeah. That's probably rarely the case.
Very, very rarely does that ever happen. Usually it's the first attack.
Yeah, surprise.
That causes the country being attacked to like, okay, well, I'm going to declare war on them since they just attacked Pearl Harbor, right? As a primary example. So that's why I was like, it doesn't happen very often. So it's usually those other things you use as the, like, look at what they're doing to us. We're going to declare war on them, and we are justified because they're, like you said, coming into our space, our territory, taking our people away for slavery, or raiding specific villages, killing people and taking their stuff. The resources thing becomes interesting because it might be like, is that designated for sure as your territory? Did that other neighbor know that they weren't supposed to go that far? Was it like the gray area territories, depending on how far back you go? Pretty solid where the lines are right now. But I mean, in a third world country, do you know where the United States puts a line on a map between this hill and that village? And it's kind of hard. So it would have to be that would be one where it starts getting gray, like resources specifically.
Yeah.
Because to me, it kind of goes to the argument. You'll see the memes out there talking like, if you kill someone who's breaking into your house to steal your stuff, you value your items more than a person's life. You seen that one?
Yes, but it's also you don't know what the fuck that person's gonna do that breaks into your house. That's the other part of
Yeah,
the argument. Yeah.
open the door, like grab a vase sitting right there, and like walk out the door. Why? That's why you came in the house. Okay, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know that when you come in. Like you're in my house. My daughter's in the room right over there.
Yeah.
That's what I'm concerned with. Like, what am I? I have to protect us because you've crossed this line that's not that gray.
Yeah. Well,
So
what's I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine, months back. Jesus Christ, it's probably pre-COVID. And she does my girlfriend's hair, my daughter's hair, and I knew we went to high school together. She's a really cool person. And we're talking about like the value of things over people. And she's like way more on the hippie spectrum than I am, even though I'm sort of on the hippie spectrum, sort of.
I am
Um,
too.
yeah, but it's just like if somebody were to steal like things, like I can replace things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like easily. But if you're breaking into my home and I don't know what the fuck you're gonna do, then yeah, I'm gonna defend my home. But it's also I'm protecting the lives in my home because I don't know if you're gonna try to harm us. And so
Yeah.
I would be very quick to remove you from the equation of being able to harm any of us.
So I just thought of like a really clear example in my head, at least, of like the line between the two. So say someone you haven't been to my house, but like my property is kind of weird. So there's a super steep hill down to our house, so it's kind of hard to get down here, anyways. So if you go through the effort of coming down this freaking crazy ass driveway hill, right, and are outside my house and stealing my car, am I justified to come outside of my house where you're clearly just stealing my car to shoot you with a shotgun?
Yeah, no, it's insurance. Get
No,
into the car.
I don't think that's
Yeah.
like me in most of these categories, and his arguments generally go this way too, where there has to be that actual risk of life, right? And that's where I think we both agree. Where if you're in my house, I can't know that you don't have that intent already. Otherwise, why'd you come in here? So the sword hanging on the wall right here, or the axe that's next to my bed, might be a better example if you don't necessarily have a firearm. But I don't know that coming out of my bedroom. So
Well,
I'm gonna
this is what gets weird too, because I understand people are going to listen to this. They're going to be on various spectrums of mental
sure.
thoughts, and so if you saw somebody trying to steal your car, what would you do? Would you try? You at least at minimum probably try to stop them from stealing your property, right? But then it's like, how far would you go to stop them? And that's where the escalation things comes in. So, but you don't know. That's the problem.
And it depends on how prepared you are for it too. And it's
Yeah.
unfair to think that everybody's going to feel the same way as I am about it, because I'll go out. I would try to stop them, but I also wouldn't try to get so aggressive that I potentially risk my own life. When I have insurance on the car,
Yeah.
I can call the police and like I can recover my losses if I don't get hurt, right? But if I go out there and I get shot because I'm being too aggressive about trying to get my car back from this person, I can't do anything for my family other than provide them with my SGLI.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what folks don't think about. It's and even for me, like if things came down to like real violence, my first go to. I mean, right now I don't own any firearms. I used to, but I don't right now. But I have to buy another one sometime this year because America's getting a little fucking sketch right now. I'm gonna be honest. All right, it's been sketch for a minute, but if I have to get in like a physical confrontation, I'm not even trying to hit somebody. I'm just trying to like disable you, so you can live, whatever life you might have. But it's like, but I'm equipped to do that, because I know jujitsu. I'm a purple belt in jujitsu, so I can easily disable the average person, even if they're bigger than me. I can easily disable them. But I think when most people go in, they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go fuck them up," blah blah blah. They don't understand the actual, um, the cost of violence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they don't, because they're not used to it.
Well, and I think what you're alluding to too, and it's not clear to those people, is it's twofold. It's not just the cost of the person you're putting violence towards. You pay a cost too,
Yes.
like, depending on how far that violence goes.
Yeah.
If you, like you said, even if it's just injury, if you injure that person for life, and they no longer can use their left leg, like get slammed in a door, break the leg, and then that knee never recovers, like that will mess with you. forever. Like you will know, like even though they made a mistake, and who knows what their reasons were for trying to steal your car, and our man in a cave story we're coming up with here. Like I don't know the reasons they were here to do it, and it might have been that they're trying to feed their family by selling the car off afterwards.
Yes.
You know, and you now not only like obviously foiled their attempt to actually feed their kids, but like also smashed their leg in the freaking door and ran it over with the car or whatever, and now they are going to have no way to be able to do that in the future. So like that will, if you end up going to court and doing all the other things and getting the whole story, like that violence that you decided to prosecute is going to stick with you. So the cost that you're going to pay in your own like mind and psyche and everything else has to be worth what it is that could be lost.
Yeah, I think most folks, that doesn't even come into their mind. They don't think that the vast majority of crimes in America are crimes because people just don't have enough resources.
Yep.
You know, and it's just like the person that's going to steal your car, they're not stealing your car because, you know, they want your car. They're stealing your car because they don't have fucking resources. You know what I mean? And they need resources, and their resources might be through having your car for either transport or to sell your car to get resources. You know, and not enough people really seem to understand that side of it, but I understand this is like a way more complicated concept to understand. I understand that people in like the various walks of life, they don't have the mental cycles to even understand these things. But it's like at some point, but that's even part of the same issue. It's like you're already in this cycle of where you can't even take time to understand that there's poor people and people that have been fucked over, you know, and that need resources, but our society has deemed them not worthy to get these resources, and therefore they needed to take resources, and that can be used for the world. So we're going to get back to like the actual original concept when we talk about wars. Is that there's places, it's like they don't have the resources to do anything, so they might happen to lash out to get resources, you know.
Yeah, and so that becomes, in my opinion, and it's not necessarily outlined in Walter's book, but there's a pretty good bit in it on the counterpoints, like the people who argued against his concepts because he didn't cover that particular piece of it too. But in my mind, that becomes a failure of diplomacy too, where war is intended as an extension of political power, where you're not able to accomplish your goals through every other means that you could have tried politically to accomplish what it is that you need. So you resort to violence because there's no other option. So like in the country, because we're now talking nation states and countries level, like they're falling short on resources and need it, and their nearby neighbor who they could potentially start a conflict with has it. In many historical cases, there was like no effort to like say, hey, can we figure out a way that we can share these resources? We'll pay you with this that we have. Very little diplomacy happens in a lot of those cases. And so it's not wrong to say that it's a failure of diplomacy, which is the step before it, that leads to conflict a lot of times. So then that's why a lot of times you'll find people who are very much on one side where they say there is no justified reason, right? There is no reason to go to war because you should try harder to do those other things. You clearly just didn't try hard enough.
Yeah, that's easy to that's easy to say. You know what I mean? It's easy to say. It's like there's certain times where it's like, you know, the battered wife has to fuck up the husband. You know what I mean? And people like you can never say there's literally no reason for violence. You can say that if we weren't human beings and we're all perfect, you know, and we never didn't have, you know, a bad cell in our bodies, but this, you know, we're all humans. We're fallible people, and there are things that we will do that we know are going to disparage or put other humans in disadvantages, and we all know this. Anybody that's listening to this podcast, you've done it. I've done it, where you fuck somebody over, and you know you did it, but hopefully you grew up enough to know that, hey, let's not do that again. You know, let's talk more. Let's figure out my own issues more. But when it comes to like your feet to the fire, when you literally are a nation leader, and people are looking to you for leadership, the easiest thing to do is like the us versus them, which is like, Jesus Christ, we did it again.
I wrote it down. I was
yeah.
like, you say it?
Yeah, I'm gonna say it. It's us versus them. Yeah. We do it. We doing it in America right now. I mean, look what just happened last week. You know, with
Yeah.
the failed insurrection, like it's us versus them.
Because people were advocating for this, like it's us versus them content, which we talk about a lot on here right now. And I wrote it down too, so I'm going to sidebar real quick. Abundance versus what's the word we've said?
Scarcity.
Scarcity. Like it was basically what you talked about, but I don't think we used the word. And that specifically is that other part of it where those with right and those without are going to be in conflict, which also kind of comes into the us versus them. So
Yep.
it's really, I would say, abundance versus scarcity. Abundance versus scarcity is like a version of us versus them,
Yeah.
where it constantly translates between those two. I think it's just the most prevalent one. It's the most obvious one. It's the one that we deal with a lot. Like it's the most common one, abundance versus scarcity. Like you said in those examples, we don't have something in our country. Those people over there have it. Let's just go take it.
Yeah.
When there might be other options, but maybe we don't even speak the same damn language. You know, like so how am I supposed to go talk to them if we don't even speak the same language?
Well, that's one of the crazy things about being human is that we're so used to using the language of violence is very you don't even need a translator. You know what I mean? Like everybody understands violence, and if I can commit much more horrific violence than you can, then I'm right. And I guess what? I'm not only right, but I get to say how I get to write in the history books of how you were wrong. So because I can use my violence and various other means to get my point across, and if you lost and died, then nobody even know what your society was even like. So
Winners write history, right?
yeah, they really do. Except for now, it's kind of. Have you noticed like there's been like kind of like a small. It's been probably insignificant for like most Americans, but there's been to me a monumental shift on information on
Yeah.
like the winners and losers, especially like when it comes to like social movements in America. Because before I had no idea about like all these issues that America had like post like slavery days, and then like now like all these stuff comes because things are written, they
Mm-hmm.
were not they weren't really that public.
It, yeah. So what I would say on this topic is that not only is like the future clearly not going to be so easily written by the victors,
Yeah.
um, that in the information age where we are right now, even prior histories written by victors are being disassembled by the ability to access all of this knowledge and share it with everyone and go like, was it really that way?
Yeah.
Like, did George Washington really cut down a cherry tree? No,
Yeah.
but it was a good story and it showed you like his character and it helped build this American legacy history stuff we talked about, right? Where we're trying to create this history where we all feel like one country back when that stuff was written to try to bring everyone together. And we're now, because of the information age and the ability to kind of disassemble some of that stuff, kind of breaking some of that down too, though. It's not bad. It's just there's other pieces of it that need to be played too, so that we do still feel like a unified people, so that we could still be us versus them. I mean, how else are we supposed to do this?
Yeah. We should all just get on the. It's hard. I mean, the us versus them thing usually comes down to like it's mostly cultures. They try to like break down even when I talk about cultures, it even comes on like a political level at this point because politics have come into like the cultural level as far as I'm concerned at this point because you can clearly for like most cultures in America you can draw a line on like what you can assume their political party is going to be based on their culture. So if I say like if I tell you who do you think this black man voted for in the last election, it probably wasn't President Trump, right? It probably was Joe Biden, even though I have problems with Joe Biden. But um, and if you can do that through like any other sort of whatever, but it's mostly like a cultural thing of like where people just don't want to understand that other culture, which is where we get into when you get to see multiple cultures around you growing up, you're probably much more well adjusted as a human being.
Yeah.
And
And I agree, and I think that's part of where I'm ahead of a lot of people. Where like I grew up in a very big melting pot kind of area, like they use that term in the United States,
yeah,
where I was very easily exposed to all of the different cultures and races, and so for me, like what a lot of people experience in the Marine Corps of like this first exposure to other groups and like learning a lot of stuff from each other and all being treated like equally like trash. You learn that like, oh, okay, there's a lot of differences between us, but they don't really matter when it comes to the big picture of being humans and being a part of a group together, right? And taking care of, and in our example, like accomplishing your mission and like making sure you get shit done. So for me, that was like, that's not a new thing. I totally knew that already. But for a lot of people, that was really new.
Yeah. I know a lot of guys like that.
It's a funny story, and if you don't mind an anecdote. So my mom was dating this guy when I was little, and he grew up in like a super all-white town, like tiny little town, all white people. And so the first time they went outside of their town, like to go shopping somewhere outside of town, went somewhere else, he was a little kid. He tells this story. He was like, it was really weird, but we grew up, and again, this is now in that town, which is this is Portland, Oregon. So there's people, like all culture, everybody, everywhere. So he like goes to this other town to go shopping, and a black man like walks. He's like,
yeah.
I have never seen a person that looked different than everyone else in our town, and it was just very shocking. So he asks, he's like, "How's that? Like, what happened to that person?" Because to them, he has no other exposure. He was like 8 years old by this point. Like, never even went shopping in another town where there were not white people. So and I was like, I could imagine that would make it difficult for you to understand that if you encounter someone new from a new culture, like you may just need to ask some questions and figure out what you guys have in common and what's different, and not need to have all these other conflicts. But yeah, sorry, I know it was like a weird story, but
no, it's not a weird story. It's actually a good story, because I think that, you know, if we took the time to understand each other as humans, we'd be much better off. Like one of my best friends in the Marine Corps, his name was Hatwan, and he grew up in Rochester, Washington, which is a very small town in Washington. And I was his first black friend.
Yeah,
because like
I graduated from high school in Washington. I have no idea where that town is.
Yeah, it's like little bits. It's like what 25 or 30 miles south of Olympia, middle of fucking nowhere.
Okay, long highway.
So. Yeah, so I've been to his place a bunch of times.
I'm sure I've passed it. I just don't remember the name.
Yeah, I probably have. Like I've been to his place. Well, his parents' place, not his place, a bunch of times when we're in the Marine Corps. But yeah, I was his first black friend, and I guess in his high school, he only had one black student there, and I was just like, "What the what?" I was just like, "How do you only have one person of color like in your whole school?" Like, it was so odd to me because, you know, I grew up in the Bay Area of California, and we had everybody. Everybody is here, so yeah, I think that just getting to know each other, just like on a cultural level, like if you get exposed to it, you're no longer like the odd person, or like you don't understand them. Like if you just grow up with them, it becomes it's normalized. But it's easy for you to like do the whole us versus them thing with a culture you have no idea about. You know, like if somebody like doesn't like somebody that's Indian, I'm just like, or any other ethnic, just name an ethnic group. It doesn't matter to me. But it's like, have you ever talked to any of them, like at all?
No.
Yeah, it's usually a no. They probably never even met them. You know, it's just like. Or when they met them, it was probably like not a good first impression, which is fine, but you can't give a bad first impression for a single person and apply it to an entire group. I mean, that literally defines.
You're talking about like a whole group of people. You can't apply one person's experience to that. Yeah, absolutely.
But people do it, you know, all the time. I'm just like. There's plenty of people on any fucking cultural level that I don't fucking like, but it's not because of not because of their culture, it's because they're fucking assholes. You know what I mean? But it's just that individual person.
Yeah, and it's a tough line to walk. Where if that was your only ever exposure, how do you not know that that's not how all of these people I've never met before are? So you have to then put the effort in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I need to put some effort in and find some people. And a lot of people aren't willing to put that effort in.
Well, it's not even just they don't have time to put the effort in. It's that the ability to do that may not even exist depending on where they live.
Well, and depending on their level of abundance or scarcity.
Yeah. Because you can't travel somewhere.
Yeah. And y'all are going to notice that we do this a lot, but it's kind of become an inside joke a little bit now. But so like my wife teaches in an area that's a pretty poor area, and it's frustrating as a teacher to have a lot of students like not apply themselves and not put a lot of time in. But then she comes back to it every once in a while. Like she's like, I have to understand that like a lot of these families are like every day like struggling to survive. Like
Yeah.
survival is the key at this point. Being able to attend and like do everything you're asking for them in the school is great, and we really want this kid who we have like to be able to maybe be more successful than us. The parents are trying, but like a lot of times it's like they don't have the, like you said, the mental cycles to be able to really work on this stuff because they're just worried about like when am I gonna how are we gonna eat tonight, like so
Yep.
it's tough.
I'm trying to look up. There was a study that was showing how if you're basically if you're poor in like your IQ level actually goes down, and it's by a
Yeah,
significant margin. I forget what it's called, like the actual study of it.
but that's not because you don't have the capacity. It's because you don't have the freedom or the room to apply that capacity to whatever that test is. I mean, shit, how many of these poor people are actually going and getting these fucking IQ tests? So I mean, like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, here it is. It was actually it's on Inc.com, but it's I forget the lady's name. But just struggling to pay your bills, which is scarcity mindset, lowers
yeah,
your IQ by 13 points. 13 points. Whole because
you,
you got to worry about shit that other folks that have in abundance don't have to worry about. You're not worrying about paying your bill. Like right now, I'm not worried about paying my bills. Like they're good. So
so okay, on that topic. So like today, so we got a like military got a pay raise on the first. For this area specifically, we also got a increase in our BAH, which was absolutely needed because
oh
it was
nice.
way under what the housing market it was for this time or whatever. So then one of the people I work with was like, "Did you actually see like your pay go up?" Or because he's like, "Because my paycheck went down." And I was like, "Well, yeah, but you also didn't pay taxes for 4 months or whatever it was, and then now had to back pay all of the taxes for last year.
Oh yeah, Jesus
Like,
Christ.
so it might just balance out, or like maybe leave you with a little bit under." But it was funny because they're like, "Did you see a pay increase?" I was like, "I don't pay attention to how much I get paid.
Yeah,
I don't worry about it anymore." Because at
yeah,
that point, I don't notice. Like I buy what I need. I buy most of the time what I want, and make sure that I don't lose everything. But I don't like the dollars and cents don't enter my mind most days, and that's absolutely what we're talking about, which is completely the like I'm at the point in abundance where I'm not even thinking about scarcity at all for me, for sure.
yeah, and it frees up a lot of things, and I think that America has it's like the soft underbelly of America where we know these people are failing and but we're
Hmm.
allowing them to fail. And this I'll bring it back to like what the actual conversation is, but you have whole countries that are like that, to where
Yeah,
whole countries are failing and they're like, what the fuck do we do? You know what? Let's just go proverbially, punch somebody in the face and take what they got. Because we want what they got.
because it's at least something that you feel like you could do, right? Like that's
Yeah.
like this is what we're able to accomplish. We don't have anything else left. We need to go get it. I do have to say though, like, was that a keto like I need to lose weight punch at the soft underbelly?
No, get out of here, man. You can probably run further than me right now. Put me on a bike though. I'm good.
So we talked a bit about just ad bellum, which is there, and even in those cases, like there might be a justification in those like super scarcity mindsets that you could see some justification for that conflict, but I still feel like and it's covered in a lot of these too. In his book, there's a couple specific examples about saying that it's not justified because no effort was made in most of those cases because you would have kind of seen it coming if you did and told them no. Then they're kind of justified too because you provided zero support and didn't help them, and they're in that now position where they're not left with other options. So in those cases, it starts to become justified. But if it was, I didn't even talk to them. I know that they have it. We need it. I'm just going to go take it. That's not justified. Like it's because we have to start making some rules, and that's a big part about why this book was made. Is that he felt like people kind of fall into two categories. They say for war, there's like no reason to do it. It's never justified. It's not okay ever. And then there's another group which is like there's a whole lot of reasons that you could go to conflict or whatever. So he's trying to find like we need to find a middle ground where we can talk about it and say these are the kinds of things that make it okay, and we can talk as interconnected societies as a planet at this point. It's starting to get to the point where we're so interconnected now in the, in the oh, late, like it's not late, but far into the 21st century. We're really talking global economies, and we're talking about globalized other things. Like, we really need to start talking as like a world community. And so he's like, if we're going to talk about these things, and this is the 1970s, we need to have some discussion on it. And that's why he wanted to start this conversation with this book. So, but
Well, I mean, it's interesting you talk about like globally, because I think that there's this whole push, especially in over the past 4 years, about being so anti-globalism. Like, just like fuck the rest of the world, like America first. Like, I understand, yeah. If you're an American, yeah, America should be first. I get that, but there's a whole lot of rhetoric that comes after that, where it's just like fuck everything. Like, just like the whole COVID-19 thing, and they were just like, oh, we need to get everybody in America, you know, vaccinated before the rest of the world. I'm just like, what? So we're just gonna shut down America until all of America gets vaccinated, and then like, what are we gonna do? Then you're gonna give it to them, and I mean, first, I mean, and also, well, it's gonna get into more bullshit, but we didn't have a good response to it. But it's like shit like that, where it's like it's really short sighted, where you think that, you know, only our human lives matter, rather than the entire world. Like, yeah, I get that we should have priorities for America. I get that,
yeah.
but these
So
other people are human beings too. So
a topic I think that is the next one, which kind of plays into this very, very specific topic, is like because it's a capitalist concept, right? It allowed us to be able to figure out a solution. So we were able to drive people towards the idea, like, hey, if I figure out the freaking vaccine, I'm gonna make some money.
yeah,
Right? So they
yeah,
put a lot of effort into figuring it out. And so they still do need to make money because of the way our society is set as an economy, or a capitalist economy. But there also should be the humanist side of it, where they say, so what we need to do, what the right thing to do, because one manufacturing plant, or even if you own, as Pfizer or whatever, 10, unless you turn everything over to making only this one thing, you're not going to produce enough for the world to sell it to everybody,
yeah,
right? So that you have to sell the formula and sell the ability to produce it in other countries to these other people, make some money off of it still, but like, let's get this thing out there. So there are ways to do it in a capitalist society, but like, it might not have made as much money, so they maybe weren't as interested. But there's got to be a balance between the two, and that's
yeah,
where I feel the kind of one of the topics I mentioned earlier is talk about maybe later would be like capitalism versus socialism versus communism. Like, what's the differences, and why do certain things work, and what's there. And me personally, like, even as a libertarians don't shoot me. I feel like a republic, the right answer is kind of a balancing act,
yeah,
and no one's really written that out yet. And I've been interested for a while in just trying to really lay out the groundwork of a like republic version of an economy, where you're like, you need some of this and some of that and some of this, and it's in these specific areas, and really kind of try to, in my head, what I see, break that down as like the right answer kind of thing. Because anything that goes extreme, as soon as, I mean, and I'm pretty sure anybody should agree, except those people who are extremists, but once you go like really, really, really super extreme onto one side or the other of any topic, you lose sight of like the bigger picture.
yeah, yeah. You really do. That's one of the reasons that I really liked Andrew Yang. I talked about him on the eBay episode, but it was really just figuring out a new 21st century economy that has like a melding of multiple concepts. Because I think right now, I think people are starting to see in America some of the failings of capitalism. Don't get me wrong, capitalism has done a fantastic job for America for a very long time. But at this point in time, I think that it needs to be modified and or replaced with a better system, because we can't just pretend that like this concept that was, hundreds or maybe even thousands of years old can apply to a society that has the fucking internet. You know what I mean? And all these other issues that, trillion-dollar companies, people that have the vast majority of money, which, don't get me wrong, if you want to be a wealthy billionaire, be a wealthy billionaire. But the capitalist society is not really, it doesn't really account for that amount of wealth for a single person. It really doesn't, especially when you have, so we have in our tax codes, we have all these ways you can get around paying taxes, right? Even for corporations. But I don't think that that should be possible. I think that if you live in America and you made the vast majority of your wealth in America and you use American public works, you need to pay your fair share. And I don't think that's arguable for anybody. So when people talk about, people get mad at, Jeff Bezos or, Bill Gates or blah, 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 blah. Listen, I get it. Like they don't probably pay as much taxes as, normal people as far as percentages goes, especially when like the vast majority of their money are in stocks, which those aren't really taxed at all. But they also um, use charity to give their money away.
Mhm.
But in my mind, it's like why are we relying on these people's charity when it should just be going to it could be not should be it could be going to the government to make all of our society better instead of them picking and choosing where their money goes.
Yeah, but so this is where we may actually disagree on something too. So look at that. But what I would say is that I would prefer individuals to choose charities that they provide to, so that the charity has to be successful. Otherwise, me as a person who wants to give money to it, like say it's an organization that's not March and Dimes, but is also interested in like children's medical research stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, March and Dimes is going to do a way better job of covering it because they already have this huge network and they have these places they can take care of. Why would I donate to this secondary like thing that's trying to take money away from March and Dimes? Basically, in my opinion, right? So I would be like, well, why wouldn't I just give to them who could take care of it? Um, but if we then replace March of Dimes with some government organization who is supposed to be responsible for children's cancer research, like and other children's birth defect research things, like they're gonna fuck it up. They're
Yeah.
gonna do a terrible job at it.
So
So I would rather give my money to someone like me or you who is running an organization that we know, like, look, their heart is 100% in this. They want to do better. It's not just a bureaucracy that says they have to do something and there's these rules that they have to follow and that's all that they have to do and it's going to always be the bare minimum.
yeah, I
That's what
mean,
government.
yeah, I mean that's a good point. But I'll give like, a couple of examples. I was gonna say three, but I'm probably only gonna give two examples, or like kind of refute to what you're saying. Yeah, the charitable donations, obviously, that's a good point. But you can't rely on charitable donations when it comes to like public works. Like I can't rely on Bill Gates to put in money to keep building bridges or upkeep bridges and shit like that. Like that's just not going to happen. Also, when it comes to like the March of Dimes and stuff like that, um, I don't even think we should in America. Why the fuck do we even have a March of Dimes? Like, why is this a necessity in America to have like this charitable organization that is to basically keep mostly kids healthy in America when we can use tax dollars to fund something to keep them healthy to begin with? But more to your point, the government has fucked up a lot of shit. They have, and so this is where it needs to kind of be like a melding of ideas where like, hey, like you guys had when it comes to like public works or in that point it's going to get into like universal healthcare.
Yeah.
Let's get a hybrid idea going on where we combine both government work and public and private work and figure this shit out to where we don't have any more goddamn sick kids that can't afford healthcare. But relying on billionaires through their charity to do that, I mean, there are some billionaires, yeah, well, they're willing to give away their money, but it should not. It's not an obligation. That's the problem. Like we're relying on obligations of these people that are wealthy, but if you become a billionaire, you have zero obligation to give money to anybody, none.
So the problem is, so our system uses taxation and like the ability to not be taxed to incentivize certain behaviors, right? So I totally agree that what we could do is not allow those donations to be like getting you out of providing to the basic stuff too, right?
Yeah,
There still should be like a baseline, like you can't end up under this amount.
yeah,
If you do your job as a very wealthy person and provide to these charities that can help our society, cool, you can get a certain amount off of what it is that you're paying into our taxes, but you still need to pay a certain amount in. Like to be able to end up at zero is stupid.
yeah. Okay.
So that's one part of it that I could definitely lean towards. And for a while, I had this idea with taxes, and what I want to kind of segue into is maybe we should just do a whole taxes episode.
Yeah, that'd be a good
Um,
one.
it's a huge topic, but like I've totally shifted my philosophy on taxation, and I think that would make for a really good topic. And maybe I'll just leave that as a cliffhanger. What
Okay.
did he used to? What does he think now?
Yeah,
Who knows?
I changed my ideas on taxes too. I think I forget the guy who had the idea. It might have been Mike Huckabee.
Yeah, and I think like we talked about too, some of the Andrew Yang stuff was definitely good and opened my eyes to a couple of other ideas of ways we can solve some of the problems. So yeah.
We just need better. I just tell you, we just need better ideas. Just we need to stop. We've been using the momentum of ideas in America for like 400 fucking years.
Yeah,
Well,
but not
not
government.
400, not that many, but it's been hundreds of years, probably 300 something years. But um, it's been way too long where we've just had these rules that were in the time of muskets, and it's just like, how are we still
Yeah,
using these ideas today when we have modern problems? There's not a single issue in 1775. Not a single. There's very few issues in 1775 that are really applicable to today. You
yeah.
know, I mean, like,
Even to your point of roads, like that's not a thing.
yeah,
They weren't thinking about maintaining roads and bridges and stuff like that.
yeah. So we just need to, if America wants to still keep being on top, which it's kind of fucking shifty right now, but if we want to keep being a world power, we need to have better ideas that are modern ideas and just stop riding the wave, because the wave is almost done. The wave is at the shore and it's almost done at this point in time. And if
So,
we don't, yeah, if we don't make a new wave, then we're not going to be on top anymore. Russia and China, and probably not North Korea, but probably Russia or China, one of the two, are going to be the next
yeah.
world power, and we are not going to like it.
So the issue isn't new and good ideas; it's the ability to implement them. I think plenty of people have these, but it's so difficult to get anything new to actually happen. And that's where the real like change needs to happen, so that we can make these ideas happen faster. Um, have you heard of BRIC, as like the next concept of big nations thing?
No.
So it's this idea that it's Brazil, Russia, India, China. So those four are like really the ones referred to as BRIC in a lot of big discussions on economies and world power concepts, um, where changes are happening in those countries so fast, and their growth is huge. And it's funny too because Brazil is put in first, not because it already is, but it shows such huge potential for growth beyond
Oh yeah.
what it is everybody thinks of them about right now. That and they're going to be like that sleeper one that like no one's thinking about. Like, oh man, where the heck did Brazil come from in the world power like discussion? Um, Granted, there's a lot of organizations trying to slow them down because they're like destroying the Amazon and all sorts of stuff.
Well, it's not just that. It's their government is kind of fucking them up themselves. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, there's like a lot. We have corruption here,
yeah.
but they have a lot of corruption there.
What's that?
I said that the corruption there is like it's pretty bad.
I would be very interested, and I'm going to be very careful about what I say and pay attention to the previously mentioned disclaimer. Um, I would be very interested to see a study that actually compared the levels of corruption uh, between Brazil and maybe some other countries.
Yeah. Okay. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I can say it.
Yeah,
Between like us and them. So I'm speaking from a guy who, I've been doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for like more than 7 years now. My instructor is Brazilian.
yeah,
So like, and when he talks about like the like politics in Brazil, I'm just like, holy shit! Like
yeah,
the stuff with like how I'll give you an example like the Olympics. All right, so in the Olympics here in America, you know how like we have like these Olympic cities and like pouring all this money into Olympic cities, and you know it costs us a lot of money, but also we end up using those buildings afterwards, right? For the most part, we end up using them for whatever for various reasons.
other arenas use them as other sporting locations. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll find something for.
in Brazil when they had the World Cup, they built like all these facilities for just the World Cup, and some of them were in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like
Oh,
seriously, like they're just like in a fucking jungle somewhere, like literally in the jungle, and they were used like once or twice, and now they're just
yep.
rotting, and it's just
I want,
like,
yeah.
and you'd have like my instructor would show me videos of like these crazy like the way that the police work in Brazil and the way they take down criminals and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to shit on Brazil. I'm just saying they have issues as well. I mean, we have issues too. Don't get me wrong with police when it comes especially with police brutality. We have issues here too, but it's
I,
just like
I I've been known to describe Brazil as like a very metropolitan Wild West, right? So like
it depends on where you
very much
live.
like stuff just happens and like it gets taken care of, and most of the time you're like, I see how that happened. Okay, cool. Maybe we will want to put some rules in place, but like there's still huge cities and it's still very like very modern stuff going on, but
Yeah.
it's still very Wild West about how stuff is handled. I was like, whew. As much as I read about it, it's a little crazy. I'd love to see a study specifically, and I need to look and see if there isn't one because there probably is. But yeah, literally directly comparing corruption levels between all of them. I know that there's a there's a site that I usually use to compare countries on statistics,
Mhm.
and I know that there is a corruption tab that they have to compare the two, and I may have to do some for the next conversation because maybe for whatever it is, taxes or economies, whatever we decide to do. But like I could pull up some stuff about that maybe. I had never thought to research and compare the differences between Brazil and specifically a couple other countries maybe. So
What I think well,
noting.
well, yeah. I mean, I think that when we talk about me saying it, not you, when we talk about American corruption, is that people kind of downplay the amount of corruption that we have here in America. I mean, we literally changed words to get around bribery. I mean, we just call it lobbying. It's fucking bribery. You know what I mean? So when people say, "Oh, we got lobbyists, we got," just translate that in your mind from now on going forward. It's bribery. All right, somebody's paying money to get their agenda across. It's fucking bribery.
And I mean, and a lot of times, like the concept started right with good intentions, like a lot of things do, trying to protect people because they pretty much lobbies started as lobbies for unions to try to make it so that workers had safe workspaces. That's
Yeah,
literally like the whole reason the whole concept started. But then everybody wanted to start one because, well, I want to protect my business too, and I want people up there buying stuff, and it's gotten a little out of hand, to be completely honest.
it really has. Like somebody, when was it? I think it was like last week. Somebody was asking me. Yeah, it was last week. Like, why don't you get into politics? Like, why don't you become like a politician? I'm like, literally, like people, more than one person has asked me about this before, and I think after like the fifth person asked me, I was like, I'm gonna look up how much politicians make. So I looked it up. Like, I'm gonna be. What if I want to be like a local mayor or some council member or something like that? I looked at the actual like the amount of money they make, and I was like, no, like, get out of here. Like, it's like I would have to be the crookedest politician for me to like, unless I was like literally like on the Senate or something like that. I couldn't even live the life I'm living now, like on normal, unless I was like the mayor of like L.A. or San Francisco or something like that. That's not gonna happen. Come on.
So like, so you may know this about me. I think we've talked a little bit about it. So my goal at some point is to really hold positions and try to make things better in whatever place I decide to settle in.
Yes.
So this whole life of mine has been a plan towards that goal with, a pension and like follow on career and then potentially politics where I know that I've got whatever I need already sitting there financially, right?
Yeah.
It's not about whatever the mayor's pay is. Like I could literally do what a lot of presidents lately have done, which is like, I make so much money, I don't have to worry about it. Oh, president's pay. Oh, I'll put it back in the company. Like, yeah, but dude, you're talking about $100,000 where you're making $650,000 per year on your residuals from the other things that you've done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're not worried about, oh, good job giving back a tiny little portion of what it is that you make. No one cares.
And it's also what's hilarious to me was then when a certain person talks about, giving their salary back or putting it to charity. It's like, but it's not even your money. It's tax dollars. Like what? Like you're literally giving back the money to the people that already belong to the people.
And probably giving it to an organization, depending on which president we're talking about, different ones, different things that you have an interest in and helps you anyways.
Exactly. So it's like it's not altruism. I mean, it's not. So
It's supposed to be.
yeah, it's supposed. I mean, I get it, but it's just like I don't. Yeah, maybe I should do.
Um,
Maybe. Listen, if I ever get on your level, obviously I'm nowhere near retirement. You are. You're very close to retirement. You could retire right
I
now.
agree.
Yeah. I'm not in that same boat. But
Yeah.
if I did have, you know, enough residual income to do it, maybe
Yeah.
I'd think about it. But at this point in time, it's like, I don't have. I need to have like the job that I have is pretty fucking cush. I work
Yeah.
4 days a week and I'm happy. But if I can ever make it so I can replace the income that I currently have right now, which is pretty substantial, if I can replace that income and then do whatever I wanted to, I probably just teach jujitsu. But maybe I think about being a politician and like actually making a difference on this planet. Rather than other than doing this podcast. So hopefully this podcast is helping some people out, to understand
Yeah,
things. But
yeah.
yeah,
So like this, and that was one of my thoughts for maybe a follow-on career, like to get the gap between the two, because I still want to wait a little while. I still want to feel like I'm doing a little more grassroots stuff before I maybe even try to run for any kind of office. But it would be teaching civics type classes like this to high school students, so that way we're making a better voter population when they go out. Like you are actually educated enough to go make these decisions. Thank you. Be that guy making that difference. Potentially even teach college classes on political science and things. So I could see doing that as the in between, so that on both levels, like stepping from here, I've already served the country, but like serve our nation by teaching youth how to like participate in this better, be more active participants, and then eventually like do that myself also. So
that would be cool. Yeah, I thought about doing like teaching poor kids on like
yeah,
computers in general, like especially what I do, like specifically like data storage, because I think
yeah,
that one of the things I took for granted like growing up is that I didn't I didn't need somebody that looked like me to like know what I wanted to do. I think a lot of people that they need to have somebody that looks kind of like them to understand that hey, I can do it too. But for me, I just didn't care. Maybe I was too stupid. I don't know, but I knew what I wanted to do from since I was like 11 years old. I was like, I'm work on computers. I'm good. But I'm seeing now that there's like a lot of kids that are minority kids, especially even just not even just minorities. It's most minorities, but even if you're like a poor white kid in America, you might not know that you can do these things.
yeah,
And I think that there is some value in showing that you can do it. It takes some work, but it's probably not as hard or as difficult that you think. Like there was like some a black nerd group that I'm a part of, and I made a comment about like what I do for a living and like vaguely how much I get paid and how much I actually work. And they were just like, "Oh my god, like what do you do?" Blah blah blah. I'm just like, where did you go to college? I'm like, I didn't go to college. Like you don't have to go to college to do all this stuff. Like you don't.
right. So that's what I was just writing down because of what you said. Made me think of something. So like we're talking education systems and like college versus trade schools, and I would love to make that a whole topic. Like I think
Yes,
that's
me
we
too.
should definitely talk about that at some point because I think what you described is this idea that um, you know we have such a structured system in the United States, and it doesn't have to be bad, but sometimes it goes that way here because the reason I say it doesn't have to, I've spent a lot of time in Japan, and I know like I love Japan, and their school system is highly structured, like super super structured. Um, but theirs is also very successful in educating their population to be ready to move into their next career. Um, like you have to get selected to make it to the high school level.
Wow.
If you're going to like middle school level stuff, like in the United States, call it like middle school, junior high school. Like you have competitive tests to determine which high school you get to go to. Like if you don't test well, you're just going to that high school instead of going to like the really good one that's like got trade school stuff and teaches you all the like really going to make you really ready for it. They basically decided, no, you're dumb. You're go over there. We're like, dang, that's crazy. It's not even in college. So by the time you're going to high school, you're already like starting to get groomed to move into certain professions. So pretty cool. But I mean, it's also super structured. So like for the arts and like some of the other stuff, there's not that flexibility to be like artistic and the other things and still fall into their system very well.
Yeah, I would not have survived. Well, I mean, I didn't survive in American school system. I mean, I barely passed high school, so like seriously, barely.
But like I think there's room within our system if we can make it clear to the public that they have these opportunities where you could go to a trade school or do some other things that don't necessarily follow the traditional like college process. But it's twofold, right? Teach the students that they can go to these other options, but then also like hold the businesses accountable. Like you need to make it clear that they could come to you with these other skills. So
Yeah,
people get left behind a lot of times when they totally could have accomplished the mission for that company because they didn't have some college degree. Like,
yeah,
but I've done a similar job for 5 years, and I went to a trade school, and I have a certification, and I like hire that person because they probably actually care more.
yeah. We'll talk about it on another podcast. Let's get back to because I want to talk about it more, but we need to get back on
We
topic.
do. So there's only really one big part left of the very specific topic I wanted to cover, and that's just in bellum. So we talked about just ad bellum, which is it justified to start a conflict? But then there's also within his concept and within his book a concept called just in bellum, which is basically like, are your actions even within war justified? And that's where there becomes the really, really huge argument of people who say it's war. Like love and war, all things are justified. You could do whatever the hell you want. Once the war has started, like there are no rules, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's a serious argument though, because like what is said by them is that if you look historically, people break what we might think are the rules of like justify like proper conflict between each other, like being still humane but prosecuting a war. They go to super huge extremes and very rarely are held accountable for those actions. And his counterpoint, and it's laid out really well in several parts of the book, and I still want to just recommend that, like, maybe you're not going to go sit and read the whole thing, but find parts that you find interesting and read those. But he lays out how, like, in every single one of those examples, that's not true. Either they're held accountable for breaking what are pretty common rules, or without anyone telling anyone, because some of these are far enough back in history, no one has said this is what you're supposed to do when you go to war. That didn't exist. But you could just see that there are some very common norms of things it's okay for everybody to do, and everybody knows going into the conflict it's okay to do this, and it's not okay to do that. In those includes like delineations between combatants and non-combatants, like what is an acceptable like situation where loss of life for non-combatants, and in the book they specifically you could talk soldiers for combatants and civilians for non-combatants, and they're kind of interchangeable terms. But like, when is it acceptable to say like some non-combatants are probably going to get killed as we take this action, but the goal that we're trying to achieve, the thing that we're trying to stop, the actions we're trying to take are worth that potential loss. And it has to be something where you can say, I can see that it outweighs the thing we're trying to stop, right? That has to be there, or it's not justified.
Yeah, this is where like my perception of war really changed, was like when it came to like the amount of civilian death, especially with um the recent, Iraq and Afghanistan wars, where it's just like there's been way too many, in my opinion anyway, civilian deaths in those two wars that are not justified to me really at all. Like, I understand that 9/11 happened. Yeah, we need to go find a bad guy. We found the bad guys. We killed a lot of them. But at the same time, it's like, when do we end those wars? Because we started two wars from one event. I think one was sort of ancillary, wasn't, in my mind, was less justified than the other. But at the same time, it's just like, when do we end this? Like, I don't understand why we keep sending assets and dropping bombs and shooting people in these countries where we have no real, there's no end goal, as far as I'm concerned, to either one of those wars at this point in time, and we're kind of just like letting these things run on. And I don't understand the point anymore. I think that most of America doesn't even understand that we're still at war in both those countries. We still have boots on the ground. We're still dropping bombs. People are still getting killed, including our own people. And we're so far removed from it that people just don't really seem to care anymore. And it's insane to me, that's the way it is to this day. Where it's just like, if we had a justification, which we did in the very beginning, what are you justified in doing? Like what was your whole what was our goal as a country in starting these wars, and when does it end?
So, like what you're mentioning, I think is kind of separating two things, right? Where you can say there's a pretty straightforward justification for conflict in Afghanistan because it was it was identified through intelligence reports
Yeah.
and through claims by the organization that an organization pretty much housed in Afghanistan, separate from that government itself, though, was responsible for the attack on the United States at the World Trade Center and the Capitol and the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, but during 9/11, right? So that retaliation against that organization is justified for a just ad bellum. Like we are allowed to make this attack because we're trying to. It's weird though because
Yeah.
it starts to sound like revenge, right? We're trying to take revenge for, and is that justified?
It kind of, I mean, it kind of is, but yeah, I understand. Like, it's the wording is like revenge doesn't sound as good as like I don't know a different word I guess you can use.
It's not like we were worried about being invaded. We're not worried about like
Yeah,
losing our nation itself. We weren't worried about. Um, so the only wording that works, right, is worrying about preventing further attacks of the similar nature from that same organization. So we're going to go try to stop that organization from having the capacity to continue to prosecute the same kinds of attacks. That makes sense. You're like, okay, so this organization was totally capable of doing that. Let's go stop them from being able to do that. So I could get that. But like you said, you need kind of some clear objectives and what the end state is, and then when you can leave. And it became, instead of a fight against an organization that happens to be housed inside this country, and the country let them be there, wasn't like helping them, but didn't stop them. So they're not like helping, but they're also kind of culpable too. So I know we replaced some people in the government too, which doesn't necessarily tie in with this either very well. Doesn't meet a lot of these requirements. When the organization that is where we get weird now, because like the rules are generally written like countries fighting, but now we have these organizations that span countries and still cause the same kinds of problems that are outlined in the book, and had to, like, I think in his 2015 version, because I've noticed some notes on it, but I can't access those sections, really covered terrorism and a lot of like the ways those maybe need to be handled. And I want to actually, I'm going to get a new copy because I want to see the differences between traditional nation state conflicts and what he writes about for terrorism. Because I do feel like you kind of almost need a whole new discussion on it, because that example there where it kind of makes sense to say, I want to stop that organization from being able to do this kind of thing. But like, how far can you stretch that before you're really infringing on those countries that happen to have this organization in it and maybe just don't have the capacity to stop them from being there? I know there's a lot of issues in like Indonesia where there are terrorist organization cells within the country, and they are working their butt off to try to squash these freaking terrorist groups. But it's a very, very spread out, multiple island nation state, lots and lots of jungle, and they're in the mountains and in the jungle. Like there's only so much that anyone could do.
yeah.
And so for us to try to think like, I'm going to go in there and take care of it, it kind of it's taken over their anonymity. That's not the right word.
It's kind of like autonomy, right? Basically, do whatever they want. Yeah,
It's a word a lot like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. It'd be like imagine this from the American side when it comes to the Taliban.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're talking about, Taliban and Afghanistan. Could you imagine if like we had an attempted insurrection last week? All right. Imagine if the insurrection was successful and they took over part of our government, and they started sort of running the show. Most America is not on board for this. Could you imagine if that same insurrection group decided to, I don't know, bomb some building in China, and then all of a sudden China invaded us? You're just like, what the fuck? They're not American. Like we're not cool with these guys. We don't want them here, but they just happen to have part of our nation, to do whatever. That's kind of like what we're doing with Afghanistan. Don't get me wrong. These are using very simplistic terms. Obviously, it's way more complicated than that. But I'm trying to break it down. Yeah, but that's kind of like what it was like. And we've been at war with Afghanistan for fucking more than 10 years. Like it's insane. Like I think we're. When did we go? When did we start? Is it more than 10 years? I'm pretty sure it has been.
It's been 17 years.
Yeah, 17. Jesus Christ, we're coming up on 20 years. That's crazy.
Yeah, like so I'm writing a book with a major who's like in Quantico, so it's a complicated process, and it's one you'd actually totally dig. Have you read Phoenix Project?
No, but I can.
Oh, I mean, geez, that's like right in your wheelhouse. So it's on DevOps concepts.
Okay.
DevOps.
Explain.
So DevOps is like an effort towards basically taking like Lean Six Sigma and like lean processes for manufacturing and applying those to the IT world. So like take these same concepts and like really with effort like focus them in on things that we need to think about and apply towards IT operations.
Okay.
And so then Phoenix Project is an effort from the guys who kind of developed the concept of DevOps through their lessons learned through trying to run some organizations who were running really, really badly and like fixing them up.
Got it.
So then they created this fictional organization and fictional characters, but made it really kind of like character driven. It's fiction, but it's engaging and teaches a real lesson. And then they have a follow on, which is the Unicorn Project. So what he and I are trying to do is take that same feeling that you get from the Phoenix Project and try to teach the military to do the same thing. Like think about things like this and try to streamline these IT processes and understand that the business side, as they refer to it in the DevOps processes and like in the civilian world, and that the IT organization within your company can't just operate separately. Like you have to be intertwined. Like business objectives are IT objectives.
So real quick, I'm sorry. Let's rewind just for a second. So when you said DevOps, I was literally thinking development operations. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you said it in like those terms, I was like, that can't fit. But I guess that is what you're talking about. Because I looked up the book, and that's basically what you're talking about. I downloaded it. So yeah.
So we are trying to basically rewrite that with Marine Corps characters and Marine Corps units, and like learn to integrate same concepts from a more military angle. And I forgot where we started. Why did I bring that up?
We were talking about not forever wars, but basically we're talking about Afghanistan. Fucking.
Oh yeah. Okay. Awesome. So to build these characters out, I wanted to start with that main character who's going to be the guy who kind of like drives the IT portion into like operations within the organization, really has to get them there. So what I wanted for this character was a major now, right? Someone who's a major in the Marine Corps right now, but was prior enlisted and participated in like that very first push into Afghanistan with Task Force 58. So like I interviewed a whole bunch of people who went in with Task Force 58, like right after 9/11. So by October, November of 2001, we had people going into Afghanistan.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's almost 19 years. like this, like this year will be 20 years.
Yeah. I was just like trying to remember. I was like, yeah, because I remember I got hit with stop loss in 2003, and I was part of Operation Enduring Freedom in 2002. So yeah, Jesus Christ, a lot of time has gone by, and we're
past 19. This will be 20 years since we started our efforts, we'll call it, in Afghanistan.
Yeah, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why we're still there? Like, what is the end goal here? Like, is the end goal to get rid of terrorism altogether? It's not gonna happen there.
It's because of words, right? So we said we're gonna start a war, which we're talking about here. Like, am I justified in starting a war? And in that case, probably against that organization that attacked us, prevent that capability. But when you start a war on a concept, which is terrorism, like there's no end goal there. Like there's no way where that ever all goes away. It'd be like a war on fear.
Well, it's literally like the war on drugs. No, it's just like the war on drugs. Like this is literally it's the same exact problems that we're having with the war on terrorism, because you can't fight a concept. Like
nope.
There's always going to be people that are going to want to do America harm or anybody harm. And for you to fight that with extreme violence, I think in the long run, it's not going to work. You need to fight it in way different ways than just like, let me use the hammer. Just like with the war on drugs, like the war on drugs, the problem isn't the drugs. The problem is the people that want the drugs. But the whole time we've been doing the war on drugs, you've never, I'm not going to say you, our government has never seemed to understand that there's a portion of the population that wants to use these drugs to escape reality. You're not seeing the problem there. You just see that, oh, we have drugs. I can go shoot people that have drugs and make drugs. But that's not the problem.
Or there are people who have a disease, right?
Yeah.
Addiction really becomes a psychological disorder that you need help to get through and understand. And honestly, like a lot of people who get started, everybody I talked to who ever went into something super hard didn't really understand how bad some of that stuff was. Like, oh cool, it's fun the first couple times, but like you realize by doing that, like you are probably going to go down the far end of that. So they're not educated well enough, same as we talk about for voting. So like I look at where we are right now as kind of like the end of prohibition where like that was a really rough time. Like when we tried to do that and tried to outlaw alcohol, like it got violent, really, really violent across the country, really bad.
Yeah.
And so I see, I don't know, like I could look up the date, but I don't know when the like law type stuff was implemented where we started the war on drugs, but it's been
in the
at
80s.
least 30 years.
Yeah, it was in the 80s. It was during the Reagan administration, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, it's been like close to 40 years, and it's just like if it was a war, we fucking lost. Like we didn't win at all. Like I don't understand what we keep, but it goes back to us versus them, because the original
helps keep that dialogue going, right?
yeah. I mean, it really does.
Which to me from a political science point of view makes no sense if you're trying to keep the whole nation successful. Like it should always be us versus someone else, but that we keep doing this internal thing of like trying to make it us who have power and have money against them who don't, internal to our own country. Like, damn it, people, come on. Like if we did it us versus them externally, we would be way more successful for everyone.
Yeah, but I think we're so ingrained with the us versus them, just in a it's specifically in American society that that's just what we're used to. I mean, people don't understand that when you do us versus them. You ever heard of Run the Jewels, like the rap group?
What is it?
Run the Jewels, the rap group.
I don't think so.
It's really good because they go into like a lot of political things and like their actual like verses in rap. But one of the guys he was rapping a verse about once you build a cage and like it's for if you're at the bottom, basically it's for anybody. So once you start building that cage and it's built, like eventually they're gonna come for people that look like you because that cage needs to get filled. And that's why I think that most people in America, they don't seem to realize. So when we first started doing the war on drugs, it was mainly towards kind of curtailing mostly hippies and brown people. But once they started seeing that, white people were doing these drugs too, they were just like, well, fuck them. They fit in the same cage as everybody else. And we're just going to let them, we'll eat our own for this, for the sake of our country, but it's just like, if, I don't care if we went over this probably multiple times on other podcasts, but I don't care if you're doing drugs. I really don't. If you're doing other crimes, then yes, I care about those specific crimes. But you just trying to modify your reality, look, I don't care. I modify my reality on the daily with video games, alcohol, and other things. You know what I mean? And it's totally legal. But just because you decide to take some coke or shoot some heroin, as long as your life is even if your life isn't fucking together, I don't give a shit. Just don't hurt somebody else or rob somebody or why should I care that you're doing that to yourself?
Yeah, because in those cases, if the drugs led to it and you weren't justified in doing so, you didn't have jus ad bellum to start that conflict with someone else and hurt them.
Yeah,
right? So as we say, hurt somebody else, I don't care, because you weren't justified in doing so. So what becomes weird is like right now, especially with the way we treat drugs across the country too, is that like, say someone was altered for their reality for whatever reason, whatever, and then was attacked by someone else, fully justified to defend themselves, they'd still be in trouble. Like for the direct, like that person tried to hurt me.
Yeah.
Like they were trying to stab me, and I defended myself, and they got stabbed because I'm just good at freaking getting this. Like I got it right.
And if you think that what he just said is like totally insane, if you
Sorry, go ahead.
if you look at like George Floyd last year,
Mhm.
after George Floyd, you know, he got murdered for like 9 minutes, you know, and you saw in the news, like, what did they bring up? Like you know, a certain segment of society was just like, oh, well, he was high. And I'm just like, but was he fighting the guy? Like what the fuck? I don't care if he was high. Like, you watch the guy
More
die.
mellow.
What's up?
If anything, he was more mellow.
Yeah. Like he seemed pretty. I watched the whole video, which is it's hard to watch, but it's just like
It is.
he wasn't fighting anybody. Like he came pretty peacefully. Yeah, when he got in the car, he didn't want to be there, but he wasn't like punching. Well, obviously, he couldn't punch him in the face because his arms were already behind his back, and he was handcuffed. He was already restrained. And for these people to be like, "Oh, well, he was high," I'm just like, what does that do with anything?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Many people treat it as relevant, and I don't feel like it is. I get that other people have other positions on it, but that doesn't mean that I have to think that those are accurate or relevant.
Yeah.
Like I can understand that some people feel like that by being high on something that impacts your ability to make judgments, which it does, but nothing in that scenario, and because it has to be a case by case when you look at those things. Nothing in that scenario made me think that was a contributing factor in any way.
Yeah, and I guess let's bring it back to something more specific when we go to war. Is that when we went to war with Japan after obviously Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, which is a military asset. Obviously that was horrific. I mean, many of my brothers and sisters in arms died on that day, and they are still trapped in their bodies are in a fucking bottom of the bay. Yeah,
Kaneohe Bay.
yeah,
Not Kaneohe Bay. Pearl Harbor. Sorry.
yeah. Pearl Harbor. They're still at the bottom, and it's just like it's horrific.
Arizona.
But we dropped nuclear bombs on 2 whole cities, and I'm just like, how many civilians paid the price for Japan bombing a military asset and us just bombing an entire like
Yeah.
a nuclear weapon is not a precision weapon. Like you're
Especially
fucking
when on a B-52, like
yeah.
and dropped generally over the city. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, there's an argument to be made, which is it's a valid argument. Like, if you're gonna go to war, make it so horrific that the other side does not want to fight you back, and that way you can end it sooner. But it's like, damn, how many civilians did we kill to like get that point across? It's a lot, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say one way or the other, but I'm just gonna say in my mind, that's a lot of people to like just got wiped off the face of the planet for. I'm not gonna say nothing because obviously going to war after Pearl Harbor was to me it was justified, but it's just the amount of force that was used that to me it was just like man.
So it's two separate portions. It kind of falls into these two categories, both parts of this particular comment, which is that so Pearl Harbor and then go to war with Japan. So that's just ad bellum. Like, are we justified to prosecute a war against that nation because they attacked us? Yes. And then to what extent that keeps going is potentially to eliminate their capacity to continue to attack us or take us over, right?
Yeah.
So then how far we extend that until they capitulate and say, I'm not going to fight anymore. So then the decision to drop nuclear weapons becomes just in bellum. Is that justified in the conflict? Like, is it okay for us to go that far? And I think like many of the things, like it has to be very much evaluated situationally dependent. And I don't know if you've seen like calculations that they've done, because full on regular standard, exactly what we did in Okinawa, how do we then go to mainland Japan and Honshu and like full normal troop assaults, territory gaining, like ground combat, right? The full analysis was done, and not only like, so it was estimated to be about 1 million lives for us lost like in the conflict,
Wow.
but like 50 million, like a ridiculous number of civilians would die just because they were going to be trapped in these cities
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we are ground force attacking, trying to take over and get them to stop. So that was presented to the Japanese, and like we also there was it wasn't guaranteed that we were going to drop 2 bombs. We like dropped one because we're like, look what we can do now. Like, can we maybe not go any further than this? They're still like, nope, we're not giving up until the last Japanese person is done.
Yeah.
So we're like, no,
All right.
seriously,
Yeah.
one more. Like, are you really seriously want to do that? And finally, because the problem was it was basically like a junta. It was a military-led government at the time, and the emperor wasn't allowed to make decisions. And basically these really like hawkish folks were saying, no, we will stay at war, keep going. And eventually he was like, y'all need to shut up. Look at all these people dying.
Yeah.
Someone else needs to make these decisions. You're done. Sit down. We're good. Stop, please. Because it was only going to get worse. We didn't have any more nukes right then. But like, even if we just went ahead and went on with the ground assault, like so many people were going to die. It was really bad. And it doesn't matter how much you show that to people. Like, look at the numbers. This is probably what's going to happen. They're not going to believe you. So is it then justified if, I think it was like 34,000 somewhere around there in one city. And then the next city I feel like was larger actually. I want to say it was like 40 or 45. So maybe 100,000 people died in those two bombs to then save them, several million. So it's like, is this trade-off value that stopped the war, is that justified? And there are arguments in it both ways. I tend to feel like there's a pretty strong argument for, and it's the pragmatist in me, I guess, where it's like, it's a trade-off. Like if I kill 30,000 people to save 1 million people, it's worth it. I don't know those people for one right now. I can make that decision arbitrarily separate from it to save numbers of people.
Yeah. At least, I mean, you're honest about it. Yeah.
I don't get to pick like, well, these are the really good people. Let's move those out of the town. Move the really crappy people in that town, and then let them die. And there's no one who would be able to do that. So you have to make those big judgment calls to say like, can I save more people by doing something kind of terrible? I think you're justified if you make that decision. That doesn't mean you have to. If you choose to, I understand. If you choose not to, I would also understand.
Well, I mean, those are really good points. That some of those I didn't really even consider. So thanks for bringing that up. What is really interesting is our response after we defeated Japan, and I think that those are things that people kind of forget in Germany too, and various other countries that were involved in World War II. And that's something you don't see today, which I'm fucking amazed why we don't see the same sort of response. Is that if you look at like Japan and Germany, like we helped them rebuild their countries, like after we
100%.
thoroughly fucked them up. So that gives some kind of not a lighter side, but at least it helps, with all the destruction that was done. But when you see the two wars that are going on right now, there is zero, fucking probably less than zero of an attempt to really help rebuild Iraq and Afghanistan. Like we're still, those countries are still fucked up, and we're not taking the same approach. I remember when I left Iraq in 2009. They had just built I was in VBC, the Victory Base Complex, and they built a bowling alley on the base, right when I was leaving. I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's really cool. Like they're building I was like, this is gonna be like the next Germany, like our Japan. Like they're gonna build a military base there. Keep the American dream going. Yay, democracy! Like you guys can fit in with the rest of the world and not worry about these crazy groups inside your country committing terrorist acts. Let's get our shit together. We'll help you out, rebuild. But I came back, like a couple years later, I was watching a video on like how we just ripped everything out of Iraq, even where I lived, and left all the shit behind. They didn't help the country out at all. Like, yeah, we helped out with like the elections, but I'm like, they need more help than just the elections. Like, we need to help them with infrastructure and like, just to do like basic things. And why aren't we doing that? Like, seriously, like if you're going to go to war with somebody, like this is a modern world. You have to help them after you destroyed them, or you should feel obligated.
Should. And I don't think, and in my quick review of it, and I don't remember in talking about justification for, and then behavior in conflict. I don't feel like he addressed this part of it, which is like, what the hell do you do after? Right?
Yeah.
And that's not a topic that's kind of covered in the, because he's talking about, are you justified for going to war, and then is your behavior in the war, justified? It's a really interesting point that he doesn't cover it, and maybe that would be a cool follow on paper or something to write. Would be like, what's justifiable and what's appropriate behavior afterwards? Because the MacArthur story of like how he worked in Japan is one of my favorite stories of like American history. So he was not a loved character by a lot of people, but then was super loved by a lot of other Americans. The whole story of him like potentially running for president and the conflict between him and FDR was pretty interesting. But he went from the Philippines to Japan because of what happened there. And like you said, he stayed in Tokyo. He made sure the businesses got back up and running. He made sure that the first plants that were able to get back up and running were making food. Like, you guys need to be able to eat. Like, you're living on rice right now. Like, literally, they had nothing left because we had devastated it so bad. And they had also committed themselves in a certain way where, like, this island that we took over is for sugar, and this island that we took over is for this. And as soon as we took those islands back, we're like, wait, crap, we're not building that anywhere else. We have no other food other than rice. So they got themselves painted into a pretty tough little corner. And he was like, I'm going to stay. I'll stay out here. I will be here, and I will help you figure out how to get back from it. And we don't, like I said, maybe we should look back at that and do a little more of that kind of stuff.
Well, it's an easy way to to gain new allies. I mean, we literally could have had like real allies in Iraq and Afghanistan, but instead we're playing like this really weird pseudo war, which to me they're not even at this point. They're not even like really wars. They're just like, we're just there, and I don't understand the reason why. Like, let's just like roll back like our whole current situation with them and just like help them rebuild their countries, because for them, their whole country has been at war for almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you possibly repair the confidence in America or just in democracy or anything with all those people when you just saw like this military power come in and fuck your whole country up, and they're continuing to not really help you? I mean, sometimes we do, but we're not putting in any real effort as far as I've seen. Like I bring up, Japan and Germany and a few other countries as well. Like, we put in a concerted effort to help them rebuild, and we're not doing it now. I think it's a serious loss on our part. Like, let's just fucking help them.
So my impression, and I only ever went to Afghanistan. I didn't go to Iraq, but I read some books. Doesn't make it the same. But is that like most of us did good things, and
on the Marine side, yeah,
on dudes that like most of the community didn't want them there, right? They're like, these guys took over our village. They're raising poppy out there and like like transferring drugs out of the country, but like basically kind of oppressing this village. And we find ways to try to be as smart as possible about it and get them out of there. And in most cases, we were doing stuff like that, and most of the people appreciated it. It was like a policing force action, like we talked about early in Vietnam, where like it's mostly policing actions. Like, we're trying to help provide security for your society so you can figure stuff out. That's all we're trying to do, which works sometimes and doesn't work other times. But there were plenty of cases that were really shit, like My Lai level shit during both conflicts, Iraq and Afghanistan. I wanted to point out one. It was a really, really good read. I know you read a lot too. So the book is called Black Hearts, if you haven't read it already.
I have not.
So it is by Jim Frederick, and it covers one platoon's descent into madness in Iraq's Triangle of Death. So they show up for their tour in Iraq.
Oh, you said Jim Frederick?
Yeah. What's that?
Jim Frederick?
Yep.
Okay, got it. I had 3 credits, so yeah. I had 3 Audible credits, so there goes 2 down.
I actually can't pick up my stuff this month. Well, Rhythm of War is ridiculously long, so I'm finally almost done. I just haven't bothered to try to figure out something else to read. Anyways, so they like show up for their tour in this area, and the unit that they're replacing, right? So, hey, here's the security area you have to cover. It's basically this triangle of roads you have to cover this whole zone. It covers a couple of different little communities. So they have normal checkpoints. They have some company positions, stuff, but like the unit they're replacing are like, this place is a hellhole. Like we got fucked up. Like we are at like 2/3 of the strength. Like a third of our dudes got killed. This is a really, really tough area. People are getting schwacked here. So you need to be tough. Like this is not going to be an easy tour. So they set them up like right from the beginning, like plan on fucking some shit up. And they kind of went in hard, and a bunch of the people did some jacked up shit that they probably shouldn't have done. It didn't make the situation any better. So it's an interesting story, and like how that it was a lot to do with mindset and a lot to do with like, I would call it kind of poor leadership for one, but like uninterested leadership, I guess. Like there was a lot of people like, hey, look, this is the thing that's going on. They're like, that's not really important. We're going to focus on this other thing. It was like, no, this is really a thing that's going on. Like, we need to focus on this mission. Like, I'm trying to tell you, this is going to get us in trouble. Like, nah, it's okay. So it's a really tough read for dudes. I mean, like I read it, I was like, it just made me like hurt, like to know that it makes sense that they kind of descended into this darkness in their own mind in the situation that they were in, but that we even put them there in that kind of mindset, and that you can look at that as a military person and be like, holy crap, that could have easily been any of us.
Yeah, I mean that's the crazy thing, you know, especially when you're in the Marine Corps. It's like when I see like messed up stuff happen to like certain military members, and people are just like, I don't know how that could happen. It's like I can understand how that'll happen. I can also understand how people get radicalized. I can understand how people are susceptible to brainwashing, because when you talk about, you know, really it's Marine Corps specifically, because I can't speak about other branches of the military, but there is like they basically brainwash you in boot camp. You know what I mean? Like that's the easiest way to put it. How much of that you pick up or put down, you know, it's up to you. But they use, you know, definite psyops on you from the day you start boot camp, by like staying up for multiple hours to like yelling at you all the time and all this other fucking shit. And I think that a portion of our military members are still susceptible to suggestion and just kind of going with the flow. So if they see something that's bad, but it's done by somebody that is in their unit, they are susceptible to being okay with that, because that's what they were. I mean, this is like me, like way after I was outside the Marine Corps, when I was thinking about like just the certain things that we would say during like marches, I'm sorry, humps, or like just running. And there's like really vile shit that we would say, and just like, you know, like napalm sticks to kids. It's like, it's funny, like when I was in, but I was just like, I got out and I was like, wait a minute, that's kind of fucked up. You know, like I don't want to see napalm sticking to kids and all this other fucked up shit, but it's all these things that desensitize you to basic humanity, that I understand that we needed it on a certain level to like have a warfighter that is willing to get the job done. But at the same time, I think that we don't do a good job of like telling them that, hey, you know, this is only for like certain kinds of enemies, and you really need to understand like who the fuck the enemy is. And it's not just everybody that is in this certain country or looks at this certain way. But it's a hard line to walk, you know, especially when at the time, you know, in the early 2000s, America was calling for blood, you know, and people went over there and they got the blood. So
yeah, but I mean, so like a cadence that's like napalm sticks to kids, but is that consequence, you know, proportionally relative to the outcome you were hoping for? Like that doesn't sound like good of a cadence.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Therefore, it would be justified. You know, it's like it's stuff that would have to be covered in like, you know, in depth with people, but then it just becomes like a click through death by PowerPoint thing that they're not paying attention to anyways, and they're just gonna go out and sing the fun cadence.
Well, I mean, even like when we do rules of engagement, right? I remember when we did I did a rules of engagement when I was during Operation Enduring Freedom, and it's basically justifying shooting kids. Yeah. And I was just like, people like I'll say that, and somebody's listening to this right now, they're fucking cringing. They're like, you should never shoot a kid. I'm like, all right,
it's pointing RPG at you or your troops, and they're gonna potentially kill you, and you know that they have every ability to do so.
Yeah, so there are ways you can justify killing a kid, but it gets to the level. It's like, why am I in a situation to where I need to kill a kid? Like, what fucking? How many layers of humanity has been totally messed up? Back. Yeah, to like have this kid in a situation to where he feels like he needs to kill a person or anybody with superior numbers and superior firepower. You know what I mean? But they're gonna put this kid on the line to try and kill me, and there's
So that's a part in the just in bellum part where they talk about like because we just create these two groups, combatants and non-combatants, right? And like it's okay at any time to kill a combatant as long as you qualify them as combatant. It's okay. It's like, but like you said in that example, like even our guys there in the trucks, if the people there see us as an invading force, say for example, like why are these people invading my country? Are they even justified in killing our guys just because they're attacking them because we're driving some trucks through a town? And in that same example, is any of our troops actually justified to just kill someone else because they present a threat of death to us too? And in most cases, the arguments go towards yes, because you are there as a combatant, willing to potentially kill other people. Those people are willing to kill you too. It's justifiable that you do so, and then it just becomes a kind of gray area as to how much non-combatant damage are we willing to accept during that fight.
yeah, it's just it's so messy. So I hope that this whole conversation that we just had the back and forth, if you're a civilian, I hope that this really opens your eyes to like parts of the military that you probably didn't know about.
Yeah.
And just don't go ahead.
How's it? Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, these are decisions that people have to make on a daily basis, in any war, really. But I think that most
Yeah.
people don't seem to understand, especially here in America, because we are so far removed from any sort of war. If you live in America and we're sending troops overseas, and that's one of the things that is kind of bothersome when it comes to like post traumatic stress, is that at least for me, like when I was living overseas, in Iraq, and then I came back and it was like nothing happened, and like that messed me up. I was just like, what? Like people are dying over there. Like I saw these horrific events, and I can still go to In and Out here in America, and just like it's all good. And like being in crowds, like I remember when I first came back, I was having fucking panic attacks. I was like, these are too many people. Like, why are there people in like in these small enclosed places? There's too many of you.
Yeah, that's a pretty common one, and I think it's fixed by COVID, so that's good.
Yeah, I don't go anywhere anymore. Well, actually, it was probably even worse.
Fix that problem. But like, I think it was something you said earlier, and I can't believe we haven't gotten back to this point until this point. But like, we haven't had an invasion, in the United States since, or basically, actual war conflict since the Civil War. So it's like, why are we still having these fights in other countries? And like putting on my tinfoil hat, like you said, and being crazy about it. It's like, if you keep the fight over there, somewhere else, that's where they'll go to fight us, and won't come here. So there's lots of like articles written about like, is that what's really going on? And obviously, I have no insight into that. I'm definitely not at those kinds of levels. And I just think that there's definitely like I read these articles, I'm like, I can understand how that could be a thing. Like it makes sense to like try to have them come fight us somewhere where we're not messing with our society.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a unique experience from like a lot of people because I've obviously been on the active Marine side, but I've also been a military contractor.
Yep.
And so to me, I think that the main reason why is because it is easier for these defense contracting companies to exchange money through tax dollars from Americans. Obviously, if you had to deal with the horrific tragedy of war on American soil, Americans are not going to stomach that, like at all. Like, they're not going to stomach that. But if you keep like, there's no way you would have a war in America that lasted more than like a couple of years. Like a year would be like a lot. It'd be a long fucking time. But when you do it in another country that you don't really care about, you can keep pumping in these tax dollars into these defense contracting companies, and they just keep that for them it's all about the money. So like when the war first started, people are like, oh, we're going to war for oil. No, it's not the war for oil. That is not the main revenue stream from America. Like going to these wars, it's the money comes from it's little shit like having people that are in a war zone no longer being cooks. Like we contract out our cooks. We contract out the buildings of all the buildings. We contract out all the IT people, which is me. I was an IT guy when I was a contractor. We contract out basic security on bases. We contract out everything, and these are to the tunes of billions, if not trillions of dollars to these industries. I mean, I don't know if I told you, but when I was overseas as a storage area network guy, the first year I went there, I got paid $250,000 a year to be there, and they paid anywhere between 1.4 and 1.6 million dollars just for me, a single person. That's how much the DoD had to shell out just for one person. It is a job that I could have done if I was trained to do it in the Marine Corps easily. I could have done the Marine Corps as a Marine, getting paid way less money. But the fact is that there's this weird pipeline, especially with IT, which is why I'm surprised that somebody as intelligent as you is. Well, I'm not. This is going to sound like a backhand compliment. I'm sorry. As I was saying it, it's going to seem very rude, but I'll say it anyway, just because people understand. If you're intelligent and you're in the military and if you know anything about IT, it's like why would you stay in? There's literally very little to no incentive for you to stay in, because you can get paid easily 5 times more, or at least 3 to 5 times more outside of the Marine Corps. Because I don't think the Marine Corps or the military in general really values amount of the amount of worth that you have for knowing these skills. And people just they don't really seem to get that. It's like these are very valuable skills that we need to remove these civilian and corporate contracts from the military. I think it would do a lot better for the military in general, because you would just eliminate that and you would have people. And also, to be honest with you, I don't know if you heard this concept before, but I don't know why everybody in the military gets paid the same amount of money.
Yeah, I've written a couple things advocating to change that. But yeah.
It's so stupid. Like you telling me that a cook gets paid the same as like a network IT guy? Like it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Right.
I mean, unless you're a goddamn chef. Yeah, if you're a chef, maybe you should get paid the same amount of money, but you better be a goddamn good chef. You know?
Yeah. Well, and we do this thing too, and we are going a little bit into a rabbit hole, but we do this thing too where like when you get promoted so that you can get paid more, you go into leadership positions, right? Not towards more skilled positions. So the cook who gets promoted to staff sergeant because he's been cooking really well and is probably what you would qualify as like a chef now. Like you could really do some really good cooking things because maybe he would really focus on his culinary arts stuff or whatever. No, he just manages the freaking staff at a chow hall now. Like he doesn't get to still cook anymore. Like he's no longer getting to actually use his skills. And so to me, like there are people who just wanted to do the job, you know?
Yeah.
And I always use mechanics as the example because there's Motor T dudes out there and chicks out there that all they wanted to do was work on a truck. Like I want to go to the shop and change oil, change the tires, take these lug nuts off, get greasy, fix this freaking truck up, get it back out on the line, and keep going. But as soon as I'm in for 4 years, I'm a corporal now, I'm a sergeant now, like I can't actually go wrench on the truck anymore. I just need to manage the schedule and make sure all the maintenance records are done. And like there are a lot of people who do not want to do that. That's not what they want to do. They just want to work on the truck. And we have no system to say like you can stay as a Lance Corporal, but be like a step 12 Lance Corporal who's been in for 12 years and is the best freaking mechanic we've got, and you get paid more because you are the best at just doing that job.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of this in the corporate world. It's like that's why a lot of people go to like management because most of them don't have the skills to do. It's almost the opposite of like the military. You know, it's like people they know they don't have the skills to do like the actual job, so they just decide to manage people. But in the military, they're kind of forced into just doing management.
Yeah, I would say don't think that people don't work towards only doing management stuff here too.
Oh, yeah. It's, definitely some of them, and some of them they would not survive in the corporate world. You know what I mean? So that's why they stay in. But
and that's why I think your argument towards like if you are not one of those people who is like eking by and moving into these leadership positions to not have to have your skill. So if you are someone in those higher positions and you're smart and have the skill, like why are you still doing that? Isn't a new concept. I definitely have been told a few times, like, why are you still in? And for me, a big part of it was, so I was about to retire. And I decided to take this job specifically because A couple of factors, obviously, but one of the big ones that worked out well for me to be able to explain it and sell it to the family was that I have a chance here to train or like really make a change in how we train people and make them skilled in what it is that we teach. And I was hoping to be able to really, make a big difference.
No, that's actually what I was gonna. That's what I was thinking too. Is that you're actually in a position now that you can possibly make some change. Whether or not you can do it, I guess you'll find out. But
it will be difficult. It's a big bureaucracy wall that I'm trying to scale. So.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that you're doing it for the right reasons. I mean, because there's obviously issues that we both see that the military in general has, that they need to be resolved before we are opened up to our enemies. Which is happening now. So
on that note, do you want to do a whole episode on Kill Chain?
Yeah, we can, because that was a great book. I really enjoyed it. I'll have to listen to it again.
Later. So
what's up?
That might be just straight up talking about it, not necessarily a one versus like one talking more about it to the other. But I wrote it down as we hit some topics earlier. I was like, ooh, that would be fun to do.
Would be fun, especially because I can talk about it from like the more civilian side now. But it's there's like a lot of issues that I saw in the military in general. When I was getting out, I was just like, this shit ain't for me. I mean, only because like, it'd be really cool if I could have stayed in for longer, because I thought about it for a long time. I mean, even after I got out, I almost went back into the military because I was like, you know what? The corporate world, I was like, this is nonsense. But I figured it out, and yeah, I mean, there's problems there that book brings up a lot of issues and a lot of resolutions that I think are very valid that need to be implemented today, if not 10 years ago. So
totally agree. And actually it was funny because had a meeting on Friday last week, not today, with our battalion commander or whatever, and I mentioned it. I was like, have you read Kill Chain yet? It's like, no. I was like, you need to read this book. Like, you absolutely need to read the book. It will change how you look at what it is that we're doing right now. And especially for guys like him and me, like we're talking about a lieutenant colonel and we're talking about a chief warrant officer 4, like we maybe have potentially now finally enough clout to like hopefully talk to people about making changes like this. So I hope anyways, that's what I'm betting on, right?
That'd be good. You're a better person than me. Because
some of it's by accident. Some of it's by accident.
No, I mean, just you're doing it. Like
yeah.
I've been with my company. I work for one of the largest tech companies in the world. I've been with them for 10 years now, and I have zero want to go in the management side, or even just like to go up to like a different level, because I don't like corporate nonsense. I don't like managing people. I don't like I like doing my own shit and fixing problems.
And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that a person should continue to be able to get paid more as they get better and better at that particular level, and not have to move out of it in order to get paid more. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But I mean, if I thought that I could make a difference, I might do it. But I like doing the nerd shit. I like doing the nerd shit.
I try to be both, which is really hard.
Well, no, I mean, you're one of the most nerdy. You're probably the nerdiest Marine, I think, probably than myself. But I'm not active anymore, so I don't count anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big Jedi poster on the wall and Lego. It's pretty nerdy.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we get along so well. It's just crazy that we met a couple months ago.
Yeah,
and we're doing this podcast. These are fun podcasts. Every single time we do these, I hype them up, and then people are just like, "Oh, I want to listen to them now." I'm like, "All right, well, we're gonna release them soon. All right, we need to have a schedule, but I think we hashed that out. So
yeah, we're
there.
Yeah. Enrique's jealous, by the way.
Is he really? We should have him on to talk about his jealousy.
Like we both left him for each other.
DJ Exceed. You ever saw him DJ before?
No.
Oh, back when I knew him, he was fucking good. Like, he was really good. Yeah.
He puts all that same effort into CrossFit stuff now, I think.
He's CrossFit everything. It's crazy to me.
It's not CrossFit. It's functional fitness. But...
Well, I mean, he's wearing his Reebok Nanos.
Yeah. Well, and so I've been doing video production stuff for him lately too. So like we have to be very careful because he does have some CrossFit stuff in his workout space
Yeah.
and where we go record, and like you can't linger on like a CrossFit logo, like maybe it's endorsing your video.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'd have to pay for it. So like it could be like, look at this passing shot, and there was a CrossFit thing in it. Because I'm trying to show something else. I'm like, you want me to like not capture this in the shot? Like, but you have this thing right here. It's like, just don't linger on it. Oh, geez, Louise, this is ridiculous.
That's hilarious. Well, you know, it's funny.
Corporate fit.
What's crazy? So I do like my functional fitness is like with like non-conventional shit. Like I do like kettlebells and still maces and shit like that. But all my stuff is like mainly from on it. But I have like an inside track with them. So if I want to do like start making videos, I could just like be like, hey, can I put your guys' stuff? They wouldn't mind anyway because it's free publicity. I don't think CrossFit would care either.
I think their perspective on it now is their name is so big that now it's the other way around where they're getting you traction because you're using the name.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
that's
so,
interesting.
Yeah, I do some unconventional stuff too. So I do a lot of like I have two training swords. They're like gladiuses that are like heavy plastic, and do a lot of like arm work training.
The jack off motion in the sky. You're doing the. I'm just kidding. No, but no, I got you. No, that's cool.
We talked about that, right? You'd watched The Expanse before?
Yeah, yeah.
So I just watched. I'm trying to get finished.
I'm not caught up. Yeah.
So there's an episode where one of the characters like gets their fingers shot off.
Okay.
And then they like they have a regrowth capability apparently.
Yeah.
In this far in the future, so like put their hand in this thing, it gets all locked in, and then like he has to sit there obviously for like hours while it regrows your freaking fingers. So he finally gets up out of the chair. He's coming back out. He's like, like the pilot walking past him. He's like, "Oh, your hand's looking pretty good." He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go test it out real quick." I'm like, oh,
yeah. You know what? I've actually had two actors on the show on the podcast.
I think you mentioned something about that. It's a good show.
Yeah, it's a good show. You know what's funny? This is hilarious. Cass Anvar, who was the pilot, he was on the podcast, and then we met him in person at like WonderCon like years back, and we were like, "Can we get a picture with you?" And then he made us pay for it. I was like, "Dude, you're on a podcast. Like, what the fuck, man?"
Alex.
Yeah, Alex. Yeah. But we paid for it. I was like, whatever. Get your money. Yeah.
I've been watching those episodes, and I noticed the first name that pops up in the post credits. I got to talk to my CO because I think they might be related. I was like,
oh really?
That's not a normal name.
Huh.
It's a really weird name. So you'll notice that if you go back and watch an episode, like the very first name that pops up, I'm like, that's not a normal person's last name. So I was like, they got to be related somehow.
Well, I haven't watched since they went to Amazon Prime, which is crazy because on Amazon I get everything from Amazon on basically press release, so I get them like a month early. And I can, well, sometimes even more than that, so I can do like reviews, but I haven't done any reviews. I just watch them. But I haven't watched it since they did the changeover, so, but I'm further along in the books than I am with the show. So
yeah, their physics, their use of physics and space mechanics stuff is really, really good. I caught a mistake the other day, but it's not a big deal.
Well, I mean, they definitely do their research. This is in a time when there's no inertial dampeners, you know, or shields. Really, it's really cool to watch the way that they kind of do like our like current understanding of science works in space. I think it's neat.
So we definitely went a little sideways there, but I don't think there's anything I need to cover in order to go to the rest of basically the justification stuff for war. I thought about, and I had a third down in case we couldn't find enough to talk about Dave Grossman and the on combat, the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog thing, because that kind of ties into it. And that could be a subject for later. I don't think it needs to go into this because it ties in, but I felt like it was I had it down as a gap filler in case, but I figured maybe we want to talk about it later.
No, I mean, I think we have enough. But I mean, I think we talked about my honest thoughts on Dave Grossman, because when I first heard about the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog concept, that's a great concept. But then when I saw him doing warrior trainings for police officers, I was just like, can you not do that? Like, police officers should never be considered warriors. You don't go to war. If you think you're going to war as a police officer, then I think that you have a basic failure in understanding on your job as protecting and serving, because that should be your
I
number
mean,
one.
unless you fully understand that your job is a war against the poor.
Yeah, I mean, some of them probably that's might be what their mindset is, because that's what a lot of them do. You know,
Dark there a little. Sorry.
no, it's. I'm glad you said it. You know, so that people don't think it's just me railing against the police. But I have friends that are, both sheriffs and general law enforcement, police officers, whatever. I have multiple friends
Yeah.
in law enforcement. I'm just like, the system is the problem. It's not them. It's the system that allows them to do and their departments to do these certain things, and it's probably not something that they can change, but it's something that our society needs to demand better of them, because the system needs to change.
So, so in a conversation where we talk about words mean things, specifically towards justification for war, to describe what it is that they're supposed to do as war is wrong. Right?
Yeah.
There should not be a concept that occurs within, especially we're talking cities generally, right? Or like an individual city police force, like internal to your city, that can be justified as a war, right? We talked already about like justification for war on drugs, not a thing. And then so it's frustrating to think that they think that way, but it's like, what are you at war for? What is the justification for this war that you think you're going to? So there are places and there are reasons that war is justified. And we kind of covered a lot of this today, but I just don't think that I haven't seen any good case studies or like presentations to me, and maybe I just haven't done enough research that shows how what the police are doing and what war is are anywhere near the same thing.
Yeah, no, me either. And I've done a lot of research recently, especially most of last year, just going over civil rights issues and policing in America, and the ongoing militarization of the police forces in America. And it's just like, why are we doing this? But it comes to the same. It's the same thing about money, and it's the same kind of money. It's because a lot of the police forces in America, they're getting militarized. I mean, from military contracts, like they're literally getting the hand-me-downs from the DoD. And I'm like, why do you need a tank? Why do you need a grenade launcher? Why do you need a sniper rifle? I mean, a sniper rifle maybe. I can get down with the sniper rifle. But like other shit, it's like, you don't need a 50 caliber, you know. You don't need a tank. You don't need any of that kind of stuff, and they don't get it.
When you said like they get the leftover stuff, like I immediately went to the Marines are always told like you get whatever's left over from the Army, like we get it after them.
Yeah.
Like we get the leftovers. So it's like, so then are they the ones who get our leftovers? Like,
Yeah.
once with it, then it goes to police forces.
They get the worst of the worst. No, they're still getting. They say it like hand-me-downs, but it's really, they're still really new stuff. Yeah. It's like, how are you getting a what was that? Why do you need an MRAP in America? Like, what are the streets now filled with fucking landmines in America? No. That's what it's built for.
And I think we said it before too. Like the Matt V, the smaller version of 4-door, like small truck, that thing is awesome looking. But yeah, I don't need to drive on the streets.
Yeah, no, it's dumb. But anyway,
so I'm done with the points I kind of wanted to talk about, specifically to Just and Unjust Wars by Michael Walzer. Did you have any other questions, or do you want to cover anything else?
No, I think I'm good. It was a good conversation. We kind of went off the rails like we normally do. I mean, you listen to the last couple podcasts, you get it. Go off the rails a little bit.
This is where we go.
Yeah. I like the conversation. I think we covered. Yeah, I think we covered it.
Okay.
And if for the audience, if you want us to go more in depth, maybe we went off the rails on a subject to where you wanted us to get more in depth for, definitely hit us up and we can revisit. Maybe at the end when we do like a season finale, we'll just do a finale on just like how we can
answer your questions.
Yeah, answer your questions and wrap shit up. So
yeah. All right. Look forward to our next conversation. I think that means so you're gonna drive the next one, right?
Yes, I am.
Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us.
Appreciate it. We're out of here.
Like they do not. But it's always like the junior guys that are like,
Yeah.
because they want to be tough. You're like, yeah, but you aren't gonna live if you don't have us.
Yeah, for real. Just like if we got into an actual firefight, like my likelihood of survival without the grunts, super fucking low. You know what I mean? I mean, don't get me wrong. I can do like basic squad tactics and like I know how to shoot, but it's like when it comes to like boots on the ground, like a fucking large scale war, I'm not the guy. You know, I'm not the guy you want. I mean, I can do it, but you guys are definitely better well trained for that.
Warfare is definitely a team sport.
Yeah. That's a fun subject. Anyway,
I think that's a really, really good segue.
Yeah, so let's get into our.
Warfare is a team sport.
Yes, it is a team sport.